Good evening, Columbus community. This is President Adair, and I am calling the June 16th regular business meeting of the Columbus Board of Education to order. Mr. Treasurer, will you please call the roll?
President Adair.
Present.
Ms. Beckerly.
Present.
Mr. Brown.
Here.
Mr. Cole.
I'm here.
Dr. Pierce.
Present.
Mr. Ragland.
Here.
Vice President Reyes.
Here.
You have a quorum.
Thank you so much. We will start this evening with the Pledge of Allegiance, and Dr. Roush will be leading us. Okay, so he did do it. I know we didn't hear it, but he was saying it. Next, we'll get the mic on next time. You want to do it again? I'll do it. Ready? I pledge allegiance to the flag,
To the flag
of the United
of the
States
United States of America,
and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you, Dr. Roush. Okay. Before you, we have our agenda. This evening, we will have for discussion, then we will have public comment. We have 7 individuals signed up for public comment. We will have a report from the superintendent's office. We will give an opportunity for a report from the internal auditor. The treasurer's office has a monthly financial report. We have several board matters to go through. We have items on our consent agenda. And we will have announcements and then executive session this evening and coming back to the public to adjourn our meeting. Any questions or discussion about the agenda? Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
I motion to approve the agenda.
Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Treasurer, please call the roll.
President Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Dr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Vice President Reyes.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. This evening, we will begin with a discussion about safety and security in the district. Over the past few weeks, the community has spoken to us and expressed a desire to more fully understand and make suggestions about how safety and security is done in our district. And we agree, this is the perfect time to make those, to take that opportunity to really look at how we are doing safety and security in this time frame under a lens of equity, as this board is looking at all things this year, and in light of how we open school next year. So at this time, the board is announcing the creation of the Safety and Security Working Group. This committee or this working group is part of the board, and the board is putting it forth. And we will formally seat the committee on June 30th. We will have members of the public, the families, students, teachers. We will have individuals that can help us come to the table and work collaboratively, holistically, to determine what is the best safety and security structure for our district. And this does include a conversation and discussion about what our relationship is with the Columbus Police Department. As most people know, based on media coverage, the contract, our current contract is set to expire on June 30th. And so we think it is a perfect time to pause, to not renegotiate at this time, and to really evaluate what the best needs are for our district around safety and security as a whole. And so that is what we will do. And so any person who is interested, who thinks that they want to contribute to this, you can send me an email and let me know, and we will put together a committee, a working group, to bring back recommendations to this board and to the superintendent about what our full safety and security program should look like. So at this time, I will ask if any members of the board would like to make any comment. Okay.
I'll do that.
Yes. All right. So I saw Board Member Brown and then Dr. Pierce.
Thank you. Um, Certainly, the safety and security of our students, the well-being of our students and our staff is of paramount importance to all of us. Schools are seen as safe places. Schools are generally the safest place that our children, our young people are going to be ever. And you know, we need to keep it that way. There have been lots of concerns expressed in the community for various reasons, some very good, important reasons, and some others that people have raised. And I think that it's wise for us at this time to really take a thorough look. You know, much of that's not been done, especially in connection with SROs for a long time. And for us to take a thorough look at that, we've got a great security team, and obviously they're going to be involved in the process in some fashion. And I think that we need to figure out what's best specifically for Columbus City Schools. And we've got the opportunity now to do that. Agreement is up and will continue as is for the moment while we're studying this. But I think that we've got the opportunity to do some really good things and make sure that the steps that we take at the end of this process are good for everybody. So thank you.
Thank you, Board Member Brown. Dr. Pierce.
President Adair, I withdraw my comments. I think you and Board Member Brown summed it up very well, what we intend to do. Thank you.
Thank you. So just to reiterate, Board Member Becker.
I just want to add a few things. Can you guys hear me? Okay. I just want to emphasize what President Adair said about looking through the equity lens. I want to thank everyone who has communicated about this. The community engagement is incredibly important. And I want to particularly say we're grateful to the segment of the community who are made up of some recent graduates, because we're very proud and grateful for your input and your time and your energy and your passion. And it was good to see the results of your education being put to use. So I just wanted to acknowledge that, because that was a very positive coming through during all of the recent events.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay, so just to reiterate, we will, Board Member Ragland, you're popping in and out there. Do you have a comment?
Thank you, Madam President. I echo the sentiments of my colleagues. The one thing that I want to make sure that we reiterate is that we are welcoming of all opinions on this topic. Please understand that we are in the midst of a national crisis right now. Literally, we have streets that are burning still because of the death of George Floyd. And the response to that death has been widespread throughout the planet. I think this is the responsible approach that we are taking. But the one thing that I don't want to happen is for any voices in this discussion to be quelled. A lot of what I am hearing from the constituents that have reached out to me is that there are two sides to this, especially coming from Black people in particular. Yes, there are African American people who believe that the police officers deserve to be in our schools. And your voices should not be quieted during this process either. It does not mean that you do not support the efforts that are going on around the country. It does not mean that you are supportive of what happened to George Floyd or anyone else that has been recently murdered. We want to hear from everyone. The safety and security of our students here in Columbus is what is paramount to this discussion and nothing else. And so in order for us to adequately address the needs of our schools, we need to hear from every single one of you that has an opinion on this. Do not be shamed into silence, because now is not the time for that. Thank you very much, Madam President.
Thank you. And again, to reiterate, we are taking a holistic approach to this. We are looking at our full safety and security system as a whole, including the relationship with the Columbus Police Department. No option is off the table right now. We are taking a pause to be thoughtful and strategic and to ensure that we are providing our students, our staff, and our community with the best safety and security in our district. And so at our next meeting, we will make the announcement of individuals who will seat and give the formal charge to this working group. Okay? Thank you. We will now move in to public comment. Ms. Nichols will appear on screen. Thank you, Ms. Nichols. Just to remind everyone who will be providing public comment this evening, you have 4 minutes to address the board. The board may ask clarifying questions or may not. So it just depends on what you say to us tonight. I will let you know when you are at your time, and then I will ask the board if there's any questions. So our first speaker tonight, we haven't heard from him in a while. So we have Vladimir Kogan, who is going to talk to us about CCS District Remote Learning Plan for next year, board action. He would like the board to avoid pitfalls like we saw with ECOT when creating the distance learning plan for CCS. Ms. Nichols, will you please get Mr. Kogan on the phone?
President Adair, the speaker is on the line. Mr. Kogan, you have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Good evening, board members and Dr. Dixon. Great to be with you again. So as the district crafts its remote learning plan for next year, I ask you to look at the experience of the electronic classroom of tomorrow as a cautionary tale. As you probably remember, ECOT was Ohio's largest online charter school until its collapse and bankruptcy. By all accounts, including some rigorous evaluations conducted by Stanford and Mathematica Policy Research, ECOT and other online charters were a total disaster for students. Evaluations showed that students at these schools saw 0 learning gains in math and less than half of the typical learning gains in reading compared to their peers attending traditional brick and mortar schools. Fewer than 40% of ECOT students graduated high school within 4 years. In retrospect, I think we know exactly where ECOT's model went wrong. First, the school failed to require or meaningfully monitor student participation, tracking only logins rather than the amount of work students completed. Second, students received minimal real-time direct instruction from their teachers, and even less one-on-one instructional support. Third, online schools like ECOT expect much of the learning to occur through the student's individual engagement with course material, an unstructured approach that works only for a very small subset of highly motivated students. Put these together and you have a model of educational delivery almost deliberatively designed to fail the educational needs of students, especially our most disadvantaged students. Reflecting on the failures of online charters, one national organization wrote, quote, "If traditional public schools were producing these results, we would be rightly outraged," unquote. Unfortunately, I worry that traditional public schools have not learned the lessons and are now replicating ECOT's mistakes. Indeed, as we saw in many CCS, quote, online academy classes this spring, our district risks repeating every cardinal sin of the failed ECOT model, including a near absence of direct instruction and almost complete reliance on self-paced work on platforms such as iReady. In developing the district's remote learning plan, I asked you to avoid creating your own ECOT here in Columbus. Here are the principles I think a good plan should include. 1, daily measures of attendance by tracking student participation, by which I mean actual engagement and work completed, not simply whether a student logged in through Clever. As the Ohio Department of Education's guidance for virtual charter schools makes clear, quote, attendance records should show when a student accessed learning opportunities and how long the student participated in those learning opportunities. I hope the district holds itself to the same standard and that you post these data regularly on the district's online data dashboard as you do with attendance at regular schools. Second, learning from the research. As one recent study summarizes, quote, the online format generally leads to worse learning outcomes, particularly for academically weaker students, unquote. To make virtual learning work for our most disadvantaged students, your program needs to be highly structured with daily assignments and regular feedback on these assignments provided to both students and their parents. Third, online platforms such as iReady can complement but cannot substitute for high quality synchronous direct instruction from teachers. And I don't mean just office hours. To succeed, students need regular interactions with their teachers and their classmates through experiences such as small reading groups, something that was sorely missing in many classes this spring. I encourage you to borrow ideas from top charters like the United Schools Network, which this spring combined iReady with daily video lessons recorded by their teachers and teacher-created assignments. I know internet access and technology is a major concern, but this should not be an excuse for failing to provide synchronous learning opportunities. At Ohio State, we surveyed our students after the transition to online learning last semester, and we actually found that students with barriers to internet and technology had the strongest preferences for synchronous learning. As we learned from the ECOT debacle, the stakes for our students could not be any higher. Columbus students simply could not afford to lose another year of learning. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kogan. Are there any clarifying questions? Dr.
Yes,
Pierce.
Madam President, I have one.
Okay, Dr. Pierce, then Board Member Cole.
Dr. Vladimir, can you please speak to where you obtain the data? Several times in your comments, you discuss data and refer to evidence. Is that evidence summative or formative data? In another way of saying it, was it based upon quizzes, tests, standardized tests, homework assignments, projects? What was the data based on?
Are you asking about the ECOT data?
I'm asking about all the data that you refer to in your comment. You paint a very broad picture.
Sure. So the short answer is actually, I believe you should have a written version of my comments, and it actually links to the specific sources. So that's kind of the short answer. But for ECOT, there was actually some great work done by folks at Stanford who took students at the online charter schools and matched them to students that looked just like them and had the same test scores as them before they transferred to the online schools, and then tracked their progression after that transfer. And also followed students who went back from the online schools to their traditional public schools and tracked to see where their trajectory changed. So that's based primarily on test scores, on state tests. As I mentioned, again, there's also some data on dropouts. That's also from the state. But the other sources that I mentioned, they're all in the PDF of kind of my written remarks that you have. So definitely feel free to follow up if you have specific questions. Happy to answer them.
Thank you. I appreciate your response. I think it's important to highlight the distinction of the different data as opposed to creating the glossed over larger picture, so our families understand really the gravity at which we could see gaps in achievement.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Board Member Cole.
Thank you, Madam President. Thank you so much, Dr. Kogan, for joining us this evening. And I did read through your comments earlier and saw your references to the Stanford report. But I also wanted to unpack that data piece specifically as it was relative to Columbus City Schools. Has this been your experience throughout the COVID, since COVID started and we began the online academy? Has this been your experience?
It's a great question. So I can speak to my experience. I can speak to the experience of other families. I think the short answer is it really depends on what school you were in, and I think it really depends on which classroom in that school you were in. So one of my kids had, I think, a pretty great experience. The teachers were available. He met once a week. My other kid's experience was not so great. So I think that's where having clear expectations about that participation and that synchronous piece is really important, because again, from what I saw over the spring, there was just huge variation campus to campus and classroom to classroom within campuses.
And second question, thank you so much.
It's hard to go ahead.
No, I actually understand very clearly. I hear you. In fact, my son had an awesome experience online as opposed to in the classroom setting. My second question is this, and the work wasn't absent of rigor, might I say, as well. His teachers were very much involved and present. They did a lot of what you recommended in your comments. My second question is this. How do you, I lost my thought. It'll come back to me, and I'll follow up with you privately. I actually lost my thought, but I thank you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah, please follow up anytime. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Kogan. We will give Misty a second to go ahead and move on to our next speaker, who is Vanessa Reimers. The topic she would like to address the board on is school resource officers in Columbus City Schools. The board action: she would like the Board of Education not to renew the contract with the Columbus Police Department. We will just wait a moment for Misty to rejoin us with Ms. Reimers.
Madam President, while we wait, may I ask a very quick question?
Sure.
Very quick. Can we make sure that the superintendent shares where parents can access the survey for where they want or how they would like their students to participate in school? That was the question I wanted to ask Dr. Kogan. Had he participated in that survey? Thank you.
Thank you. I'm sure that will be part of her report later. Okay. Ms. Nichols.
President Dare, the second speaker is on the line. You can go ahead and begin. You have 4 minutes.
Thank you. Good evening, board members. I'd like to break down the arguments in support of police in schools. A main belief is that SROs are vital for school safety, but SROs didn't become widespread until the late 1990s, and violence and crime in schools were already in decline across the nation and in Ohio at that time. So this initial notion that they are vital is false. SROs provide protection in the event of a school shooting, the next argument goes. Nationwide, SRO numbers did explode 3 decades ago in the aftermath of high-profile school shootings. So are these SROs effective in stopping outside threats? According to a 2018 analysis of the nearly 200 incidents of school gunfire over the past 2 decades, only once had an officer gunned down an active shooter. So if they aren't needed in the first place, and if they aren't effective at stopping the outside threat, proponents will then say SROs break up fights, build relationships, and proactively prevent violence. But the question isn't if officers have done some anecdotal good in schools. The question is if they've done more harm than good. In reality, research tells us SROs have played a critical role in maintaining Ohio's school-to-prison pipeline. The Juvenile Justice Coalition found Ohio schools that frequently remove students are also schools more likely to arrest students. In other words, SROs don't abate the school-to-prison pipeline, they exacerbate it. According to federal data, Columbus Black students are already disproportionately suspended and attend schools with a higher average number of security guards and law enforcement officers compared to the rest of the state. This is all within a city police has made among the deadliest in the country for Black people. It's a ranking of 22 or 1, depending on how you look at the numbers, but neither ranking is good. And how do officers react to this reality? In response to this petition to remove officers from city schools, the president of the Ohio SRO Association said that officers could make more arrests than they currently do. If safety is a prerequisite to learning, then why are you expecting your students to learn in this environment? This is when we begin hearing about reform and frank conversation. But Columbus SROs already operate under what the National SRO Association considers an effective MOU. Your MOU contains training, non-involvement in school disciplinary matters, and meetings with school staff. And still, here you are with thousands of signatures in front of you. More conversations would be another chapter in a story your students are telling you has already been told in hallways, commissions, forums, lawsuits, consultant reports, and in previous protests. The key is police culture, and we can consider the past actions of Columbus police as prologue. SROs in schools do not mean your students are better protected, not even in the event of a school shooting. They mean you teach students their constitutional rights only to send them out into streets with the police call their free speech emergencies, then tear gas them and shoot them with wooden bullets. They mean that you encourage shop with the cop and books and badges and to learn alongside people who disproportionately use force against their family members and help push them out of school. People who do not wear badges, people who to this day continue to defend their conduct. People who have made Columbus one of America's most deadly cities for Black people. So why, when you already have counselors and security guards, would you pour more resources into trying to turn these officers into counselors? Do not tell your students that they have to take more cell phone videos before you will listen. Tell your students that it's enough. That's all I have.
Thank you so much. Are there any clarifying questions? Board Member Beckerly.
I don't have a question, but I would love to receive a copy or a transcript of the statement, if that's possible.
Ms. Reimers, do you have a statement in a way that you can send to us, please?
Sure, I can do that.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Board Member Ragland. Unmute yourself.
Ms. Reimers, which schools have you visited of late in Columbus City Schools?
Of late, I've been on the campus of several of the high schools, but I haven't been inside of the schools.
Thank you. Which campuses?
A couple of the high schools for small protests and things like that. I'd have to look them up.
Yes, ma'am. Appreciate you. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Any other comments or questions? Thank you so much, Ms. Reimers. All right, we will move on to our next speaker. While Ms. Nichols gets our next speaker, we have Rahama Abdullah, who will speak to us about removing the Columbus Police Department. Board action. She would like the board to consider removing the Columbus Police Department from Columbus City Schools.
President Adair, the speaker is on the line. You have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Hello, my name is Rahma Abdullahi. I'm a recent alumna from Weststone High School. I currently attend The Ohio State University and work at Nationwide Insurance as a software developer. I've also been working on a project with TCS Liaison on a partnership with Columbus City Schools and Nationwide, trying to create a mentorship and internship program for students. I wanted to speak today on this issue because I'm concerned on the well-being of our students, and I wanted the board to remove police officers from our schools. So let me start by saying these officers should not be in our schools, especially in a district where the majority of the student population is Black. We need to start demilitarizing our schools. Police presence in schools is bad for Black students because they are targeted. I've seen with my own eyes students getting arrested for little things that if they did in a different school, probably would have just resulted in a detention. A study by Justice Quarterly found that as schools increasingly rely on police for security, administrators refer more students to law enforcement for nonviolent infractions. These police officers' presence does not make them feel safer in any way. How could they feel safe when all they see in the world around them are cops targeting Black people for no apparent reason? It seems that you could just be taking a nice walk outside and a cop would find a reason to arrest you because, quite frankly, you're Black. These school resource officers are actual officers, not security guards, and have been trained by the same system the rest of these cops have. It's been proven that schools with resource officers have higher rates of expulsions, suspensions, and arrests. You have to realize these are the same kind of officers who are pepper spraying, tear gassing, and shooting at peaceful protesters. Just last week, I was tear gassed and shot at for peacefully protesting, and we had a permit. It's obvious they have no real de-escalation training, nor training to deal with kids. An investigation by the Huffington Post found that from January 2016 to September 2018, in the U.S., police in schools had pepper sprayed students at least 32 times, body slammed, tackled, and choked students at least 15 times, tased or shot them with a stun gun at least 120 times. That's insane. Using excessive force is seen most times as the most quickest and effective action for them to take, but it's also the most destructive. Just like how arresting kids is never the answer, we'll just escalate things even further. We have to realize the unintended consequences of having cops around impressionable kids. The first question that comes up when thinking about this issue is, what about mass shootings and how there's been a rise of them as recent? I've done a lot of research, read articles and studies, and they pretty much all say that the presence of an armed guard does not deter the shooter. In every case, the officer's presence didn't help the situation. Some even fled the scene. I think schools should have some sort of protection in this case, but not a police officer. They should not be around kids creating a mindset of fear. Our kids do not need to be policed. Another question I start to hear when discussing this topic mainly is, if not cops, then who? Well, how about mentors, social workers, psychologists, nurses, therapists, counselors? These people are trained to resolve conflict in the best way possible. If kids need to be disciplined, why not use community service as a way to inspire and teach them? There's ways around this. There's actually 3 million students that attend a school with cops, but not nurses. Tell me right now how that's not a big problem. The money spent on these officers could be allocated to more necessary and beneficial resources for these students. Come on, Columbia City Schools, we need to do better. We need to be better for our future and the future to come. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any clarifying comments or questions from the board? Board Member Ragland.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, ma'am, for your advocacy. A couple of questions. You mentioned that there were offenses that got students arrested, whereas in other schools, they would only be getting detention. Can you describe some of those offenses for the board?
So I was actually reading articles about that kind of sort of thing. And those offenses usually would be very small things. So an example would be throwing a book or something, or just something that I felt like they could have used other avenues to solve this problem instead of arresting these students. I actually just recently watched a video from that happened in my high school in February. A student was arrested because they were also tased, and their mom was also arrested. You guys can see the video if you guys like. It's on Facebook. But their mom was also arrested because she was trying to figure out what was going on and trying to defend her son, and she obviously didn't use any force. They didn't try to touch these officers or anything. There was just a lot of tension. So they I feel like a lot of times they just resort completely to just arresting and using lethal force, and it's not right.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Board or Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much for your advocacy. In your personal experiences in our Columbus City schools, could the incidences that you have seen, in your opinion, be de-escalated?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
Thank you so much.
Additional questions? Okay, seeing none, thank you so much for addressing the board this evening. We will now have our third speaker, Miriam Muhammad, speaking to us on the topic of remove the Columbus Police Department, board action. She would like the board to remove the Columbus Police Department from Columbus City Schools. We will wait for Ms. Nichols to rejoin us with Ms. Muhammad.
President Dare, the speaker's on the line. You have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Hello, my name is Miriam. I attend South High School as CCS, and today I am speaking to give a story of actually what happened to me as an example of why CPD should be removed from Columbus City Schools. Back in 2017, when I was in 7th grade, there was a conflict in the cafeteria, and I was asked to leave. My mother was on her way to come get me, so I re-entered the cafeteria to get my personal items from a friend, and the administrator actually called a police officer over to come remove me from the cafeteria, and my first instinct was to run. And as I was running, I was on my way out of the cafeteria, and I was stopped by a teacher, and that was when the officer called up to me, and I was slammed against the wall, and then I was slammed onto the ground, and handcuffs were placed on me. I was placed into a chokehold and told that I was going to fall asleep. And I don't remember much after that part, but I do remember that I was slammed onto the concession counter, and I was put back in the concession room. And my question is just, why do we need police officers in our schools when most schools have a safety and security team? What is it for? What is the safety and security for in our police? What is the police for in their safety and security? That's it. Thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you. I have a clarifying question for you. I just want to make sure we had the name of, did you say South? Was that the school you said?
South High School.
South High School. Okay. Board members, any clarifying questions? Board Member Beckerly.
I don't have a question. I just want to thank you very much for sharing. It's really important that we hear these stories. So thank you.
Additional comments?
I as well don't have a question. I want to thank you for being vulnerable, for sharing that story. And as a parent of this community, I want to tell you that it hurts my heart to know that our students are treated in such a manner within our school, and not knowing completely the story. I want you to know that as a parent, I felt that. And that's very real. And we need to feel that pain. We need to know that that's happening in our schools. So thank you.
Thank you so much for addressing the board this evening.
Actually, before you guys hang up or whatever, I would like to bring up the case of my older brother, Julius Tate's diploma. He was supposed to receive his diploma this year. but his schools told my mother that you guys were giving him problems. So I wanted to bring that up now.
Thank you for bringing that up. The superintendent is aware of that situation, and we'll be getting back with your family very soon. Thank you for bringing that up. We will move on to our next speaker. As Ms. Nichols is getting the next speaker, I will introduce her, Lauren Rodgers, to speak with us about removing the Columbus Police Department from the schools. Board action, she would like the board to consider removing the Columbus Police Department out of the Columbus City Schools. So we will wait for Ms. Nichols to join us with Ms. Rodgers.
President Dare, the speaker's on the line. Go ahead, you have 4 minutes, you can begin.
Okay. Hello, board. My name is Lauren Rodgers. I am a student at Columbus City Schools. I have attended South for 5.5 years, and every year I have seen police in our schools violating their position, from slamming someone to the ground and kicking them after they've been arrested. Mind you, that person wasn't resisting. The police punching teenagers in the head multiple times to break up a fight, to even having guns drawn at teenagers. This all happens in a school building that is meant to be a safe space for students to express themselves. But after seeing just a few incidents like these, students in my school began to become emotionless, no longer wanting to express themselves because we know where that could lead us. This is why we need the police removed from our schools, because it's terrifying and traumatizing. In my 11th grade English class, we talk a lot about police brutality and injustices towards Black people and people of color. All year long, we ran down ratios and scenarios about how my school, 80% Black, 15% Hispanic and Latinx, 5% white, is disproportionately dying and disciplined at the hands of white people, specifically white police officers in our communities. The sad truth is that police officers see us as a threat and believe we are violent, and that we need to be tamed. By abolishing police out of our school system, I believe our school will become safer and our education will thrive. I am a student in your schools, and I am asking, no, I am pleading for the board to listen to us as students and make changes that will benefit us, because in the end, it's your responsibility to serve us. Thank you.
Thank you. Clarifying questions or comments from the board? Seeing none, I would just like to remind the speakers that especially our students, we are looking for students to join our new task force. So if you're interested in doing that, please reach out to me. We definitely want, as some board members have said, we definitely need to understand from your perspective. So it's very important, and thank you for addressing the board this evening. Ms. Nichols will now get the next speaker, who is Raquel Walker. The topic she will be addressing is removing the Columbus Police Department. Board action, she would like the Board of Education to consider removing the Columbus Police Department out of Columbus City Schools. We'll wait a moment for Ms. Nichols to rejoin us with the caller.
President Adair, the speaker's on the line. You have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Hi. I would like to thank the board for allowing me the opportunity to address my concerns regarding Columbus City Schools police officers in our city schools. My concerns lie with the continued relationship with the department going forward. The school district should not be the place where police officers should be in. For me, as a advocate of my child, as well as an active parent in the school, I do find cause to have concern when in regards to how the police interact with children. I've heard my child come home and tell me about students who have been pepper sprayed, have been handcuffed while in school. That's totally inappropriate. Police officers have no purpose inside of a school. That is a task that should be administered through administration as well as security officers. You know, when we allow our staff to interact or the police officer interact and discipline children, then we're sending the wrong message. When they are there for intimidation, they're intimidation and fear. And that's not what, you know, we need. That's not going to build a stronger relationship with the police. When we go ahead and send that type of message, we're telling our children this is not a safe environment. We are continually to pass on that narrative that Black and brown children or low-income communities need intimidation and fear to function, and that should not be. Somewhere or another, Columbus City Schools have to reevaluate that decision in regards to what we're going to do in regards to our children in discipline. And it should not include the Columbus Police. I've been there in the school and know for a fact that if something happens, the Columbus Police is going to call the Columbus Police to come back out. So why do they have to be in the school to go ahead to address what's going on? There's no reason for them to be there. There's no reason for a teacher to call a police officer in a room to disrupt or stop a fight. That is what school security is. I was informed that we just recently hired multiple officers to be spread out among the schools. So to have a police officer in school actually seems like a jail situation to me. I am a graduate of Columbus Public Schools, and there were fights in the school, and school security came along and did stop the fight. We did not have a police officer in the building to monitor or to look at what's going on. Taking students down to the office, I walked in there. Police don't do nothing. They absolutely don't. I came to school and saw children smoking marijuana and reported to security. Police is standing right there. They're watching the students do it. Police is watching the students do all kinds of things. So I'm wondering, why are we using these funds to go ahead and to pay them? There are other programs that be available for Columbus Public students. We are missing so much opportunity here for these kids. And I'm just asking that the board does consider whether or not, is this a relationship we need to continue? Do we need to continue the narrative that our low income and brown children need intimidation and fear? Or should we be supporting the classroom in an environment where we can support these children in other manners? I just have that concern, and I hope that the board really considers discontinuing their relationship with Columbus PD.
Thank you, Ms. Walker. I again want to just reiterate that at this point, the contract we have with CPD expires on June 30th, and the board is not intending to enter into negotiations on a new contract until or at some time that after this working group is seated and formed, so that we can look holistically at our full safety and security and determine the best needs of our district. All options are on the table. All voices need to be heard, and we need everyone to fully participate in this process. Are there any clarifying questions or comments for Ms. Walker? Mr. Ragland.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you very much, Madam Walker, for entrusting us with the education of your most precious resource. My question for you is, as a parent, do you have suggestions on what we can do to manage the behaviors that exist within our buildings so that security resource officers are no longer needed?
Well, for me, I think it's more of a relationship with counselors as well as with administration. A lot of times, I have, my daughter attends Leonard McKinley STEM High. I have seen some of the most craziest things in that school. And for me, this seems like everyone is not present. I have the feeling of that often this is not a career, this is a job. And when we're working with children, it should be a different manner of how this is done. We should be seeing these individuals as our future, and we're invested in them. When we send Columbus Police into a room, or we are not utilizing the resources such as counselors, psychiatrists, interventionists into the situation, then what we're doing is we're sending the message that, hey, you're not valued. We don't care. And a lot of kids have that feeling in my daughter's school. I've seen it. I've talked to them. I'm often in the school once a week. That is how often I'm in the school. And I get that feeling every time. I've seen students walk around and security officers say, hey, nothing I can do. And that's absolutely crazy to me. I've seen police officers interact with what's not appropriate, and it also was not, I felt a problem with it. Honestly, if we were not living in a different district, and I have been in Groveport, I have been in Southwestern schools, and no, I do not see any of that in those school districts. So I have to line that this is something that only happens in Columbus.
Thank you for that clarification. And I do appreciate the recommendations around more counselors and more school psychologists and psychiatrists. And that is duly noted. My question is around student behavior. Do you have suggestions that we may be able to implement through board policy that allows for student behaviors to change so that the security resource officers are no longer needed?
One of the main things is with student behavior is lack of control in your classrooms. I've seen that often, where teachers lack to have control over the classroom. They allow the students to run the classroom. And that is definitely a problem, because the thing is that we all know the kids are going to be kids. That is the obvious thing that all kids are going to go through. What the problem is that when you allow these students basically to overrun the classroom and not take control of that classroom, then you're going to have discipline problems, because then you're going to find that, hey, you know what? No one's doing what I'm asking them to do. There has to be consequences. I'm not saying that there's no consequences for bad behavior, but we have to figure out something that does not involve the Columbus Police. Either it is what they used to call it, where the Saturday school used to be when I was a child. We had Saturday school. So therefore, you hated to come into school on Saturday. It used to be after school. You came in after school. You even had in-school suspension. Something other than bringing these children and having someone manhandle them. That's my biggest issue, because that's not the way to address it.
Thank you, Ms. Walker, and thank you, Madam President.
Additional questions or comments from Ms. Walker? Board Member Beckerly.
I just want to again say thank you. I don't think I've said thank you to all the speakers, but I am grateful to all the speakers, and thank you for talking and sharing with us. And please, let's keep communicating.
Thank you. Okay, seeing no questions, thank you again, Ms. Walker, for sharing your comments with us. We will move on to our last speaker this evening. Ms. Nichols will be getting Mark Semmer, sorry. And the topic is reopening of Columbus City Schools, the board action. He would like the board to reconsider opening elementary schools in Columbus City Schools. He thinks it is too early to open actual school buildings. So we will wait for Ms. Nichols to come back with our speaker. like we're having trouble connecting to the next speaker. We'll just give it a moment. One more try. Okay, apparently someone answered, but that was actually not the speaker's phone number. So, Mr. Semmer, if you are out there and would like to address the board on this issue, please sign up again for the next meeting. We would like to hear your comments. And it is my understanding that that is all of the people that called today or in the past few days to sign up to speak with the board. Just a reminder, those requests are sent through our customer service line. That is how you sign up to speak with us. And that will conclude the public speaker portion of our agenda this evening. Thank you for all the comments. I will now turn it over to the superintendent for her executive report.
Thank you, Madam Board President. Scott has, I just want to provide just a few updates on summer school and our return to school family survey. And then the last thing is on our working groups. Okay. So the new online CCS summer experience began this week. Our summer program, which was offered free to all CCS students, is completely virtual this year and includes options for students in grades K through 12. To date, we have enrolled 3,642 students. This includes 2,126 students grades K through 12 and 1,516 students grades 9 through 12. Students in grades 8 through 12 have an opportunity to earn high school course credits. The summer program runs through July 25th. We also have our return to school family survey. We recently sent a survey to all district families to gather their feedback on reopening of schools. We sent the survey twice to families via auto dialer and email system. We also posted the survey for families on our website and social media channels. We also surveyed families who have just enrolled their students to the district for the first time. To date, we have received 10,412 responses from the survey. This represents 35% of our more than 29,000 households in the district. Knowing that not all of our families easily connect with the district through phone and email surveys, especially our immigrant and new American families, the Department of Engagement has asked many of our partners to call or connect with those hard to reach families to make sure that they have a voice in the planning process. Some of these include the Ethiopian, Taiwanese social services and communities and schools. In addition to our own ESL office, they're actually calling families they serve and assisting them in completing the survey online if they haven't done so already by translating the survey as they go. These survey results will continue to inform the work of our reopening task force, and we will report out the survey results with the reopening plan presentation on June 30th. If families want to go online, they can go to our homepage, and the link is on the district homepage. The link is there for families to complete the survey. So really encouraging families to go and give their feedback. And finally, the reopening task force. So to date, we have over 165 people who are participating in 9 working groups. This includes members from our all of our union members, union groups rather, CEA, OPSI, CS, CSA, CAA, also students, district partners, community partners, parents, and also central office staff. So we are well represented, a lot of voice. We're excited about the work that people are stepping up to participate to help us. Again, on June 30th is when we will present our plan, our opening plan to the board on that date. And this is all for my superintendent's report. More to come on June 30th. I just wanted to give you a few updates today, knowing that we have a comprehensive report at the next meeting.
Any questions for the superintendent? Board Member Beckerly.
I don't have a question. I just want to say that I'm thrilled to see the response to the survey and then the follow-up efforts that are underway, because I think that that's wonderful that we're doing that. I love that it's sort of a phased and tier approach and that we're using partners. And I think it's in the absence of the Department of Engagement and our ESL department, but they're kind of working together as I understand it, that follow-up wouldn't have happened before. So I think that's a really important thing to acknowledge, that you're doing that and you're doing it well and thoughtfully and intentionally. So thank you.
Yeah. Thank you. And shout out to Alicia Gillison. I know she is on here and her team. They've been doing some amazing work. And just, again, to your point, just really excited about the work that they've been doing this year, especially during this time period.
Other questions? Dr. Pierce and then Board Member Radlin.
Dr. Dixon, thank you so much for this report. I have a couple of questions. I have received numerous emails from parents who have not heard from their summer school teachers, are unclear on what their students should be doing. So can you please just communicate what families should do if they have not received that initial contact?
Yes, thank you. I think Dr. Ocasio, are you on? Or Dr. Klein?
Good evening. Yes, so if a parent has not heard, one of the things we'd like them to do is call the VCAP office. And there's some information on the website about that, because the VCAP office is working on connecting families. They are also now in the process, secretaries just began as well. And so they are calling students that did not enroll. One of our principals during the year is also responsible for summer school K-8. That's Emma Corbin, who is one of our elementary principals, and she also is following up. So if there's a person that didn't connect, or if they're having difficulty connecting with someone, if they could start with the VCAP office, we can then filter that out. And we do have someone there throughout the daytime hours. I think they arrive around 7:30 in the morning, but to be on the safe side, let's just say 8 to 4 would be the best time frame to call.
Thank you so much. My second question then relates to our students that are on IEPs or may require a more personalized, individualized learning plan. Can you please speak to how our district, how our summer teaching assignments are meeting the needs of those particular students?
So in the staffing model, we also considered that. So if a student has an individualized educational plan, there is a teacher that's assigned to them that has that credentialing, so that we can offer special education tailored services to students with IEPs. And there should be a second teacher assigned for a student if they're enrolled in summer school and have an IEP. The other thing I want to say, while you had mentioned this reminded me of something. We are looking through all of our high school transcripts right now, and so the team is reaching out to any student that may have not passed a course to get them caught up. we're excited about that as well. And so one of the other things that we've done is we've gone through all of our seniors, connected with them, talked to them about, and we're working through all of that right now, making sure that they know what they would need to complete in order to graduate, as long as they do that before the August 15th deadline. And our team's available to support that. We have done cohort groups of students where 20 students per adult, and they're following up with students, seeing if they're able to connect. We are also connecting them with devices, hotspots if necessary. So if there's something that's preventing their successful completion of the summer school program, we're here to help that as well. And we have staff that are dedicated to be able to assist, as well as ESL.
My last question, Dr. Ocasio, I'm so happy that you spoke to that. You made me happy tonight. But this is going to connect to your last response. When we think about our students who will begin practicing on July 1st, so we talk about our athletes, are we taking measures to ensure that maybe while they're not on the field practicing, we have a touch point with them to ensure that they're getting the academic support that they need to pass those classes that maybe they didn't, to work ahead in some summer classes? So how are we being intentional when it comes to our student athletes in the district?
So we're doing that for secondary students, and particularly those at the high school, where some of the athletic pieces are really a springboard to being successful after in their post-secondary pursuits. So we are looking at all high school students. I know that they had gone back, they've talked to some ninth graders, because we don't want our ninth graders to fall behind. And they are actually combing through by hand any student that may not have received a passing grade in one of their subject areas. And they're making attempts to connect students in that way. And if there are any errors, if a parent believes there's something that's an error, they'll also go back. I know that Mr. Mitchell, who is responsible for our school counseling team, he has been very instrumental in looking at transcripts. We've had a couple individual requests of parents not being sure if students have passed. And so we've connected with those families as well. So if there's someone that has a question, and I know that Ms. Cleary, Peggy Cleary, would also be willing to assist. If you end up and you don't know where else to call, if you can certainly call your child's principal, but also our VCAP office has been helping us to filter out any questions and getting kids connected with summer school, as well as Ms. Corbin.
And as you speak of that, this is my last question, I promise. Can you provide an update to our parents and families who may be waiting for their lottery assignments? How are we working those lottery assignments in so students know what schools they're assigned to, so they can begin to practice and work on their academic requirements?
So I'm actually going to let Dr. Klein, who's also on the line, she tends to handle lottery. I would give you a guess, but I want to make sure you get an accurate answer. So I'm going to ask Dr. Klein if she wouldn't mind speaking to that.
Thank you, Dr. Ocasio. Dr. Pierce and board members, it's my privilege to tell you that lottery applications and lottery offers are being made continuously. Tanya Freeman, who is our director of central enrollment, makes those on a nightly basis. Parents and guardians get an automatic email as well as a phone dialer letting them know that they have an offer in case they don't check their email on a nightly basis. And it allows them to accept or reject the offer depending on what they've made the decision to do. Those will be ongoing up until the first day of second semester. So even if a student isn't in a particular school they want to be in right now, those lottery offers are still being made on a constant basis. And those are based on the seat availability count in which the principals and the area superintendent have set. So those will continue up until the first day of second semester, and we look forward to making as many lottery offers as possible.
Thank you so much, Dr. Klein, Dr. Ocasio, and Dr. Dixon. I appreciate that.
Okay.
And I believe Board Member Ragland.
Thank you, President Adair, and thank you, Dr. Dixon. Kudos to you and your team, especially the Department of Engagement, for making the survey easy for us to share with our parents. The communications aspect of that survey has been very well done, and I wanted to make sure that we articulated that tonight. Thank you, Dr. Ocasio, for answering my question that was also posed by my colleague, Dr. Pierce, around summer school. My question to you, Dr. Dixon, is around those students who we have not heard from since March. I've heard from several teachers who've expressed to me that a lot of the numbers were very low in signing on for our students. Are we still trying to track down the whereabouts of those students, and what are our intervention plans for those students who we haven't heard from since the pandemic really hit us hard? And what is our game plan to make sure that the learning loss is not as extreme as has been articulated thus far? Thank you.
Yeah. Thank you, Board Member Ragland. I'm gonna go back to Dr. Casio again to give the strategy, but you're absolutely right. We were concerned, we still are concerned about the number of students that we did not see any evidence that they've logged on. And we are too concerned about not only the summer learning loss, but that loss from those 2 to 3 months, and making sure that we have that strategy. That's why we were encouraging so many families to engage their students in online learning, and making sure that we were giving them the device that they needed to connect with them. So Dr. Casio could talk more about the strategy that we are providing for the students to locate those students.
Yes. So we're continuing to use staff that are available to attempt to make connections with families. We are still giving out devices. We are bringing families in if they need a device, if they would like to take advantage of the summer school learning that is available. We are making that available to any student that is interested, whether they feel that they're behind or even if they just want to continue. And as Dr. Dixon mentioned earlier, we are giving an opportunity for our 8th graders to gain credit. Another thing that I did want to share, and it's a little different than your question, but I want to make sure that you know this because I know that some of you have asked this in the past. We are working on a plan to bring in some of our CTE students to get their hours, particularly in certain course areas that they need a little more practice to get the credentialing. And so we're working on that right now. We have to get that approved, of course, by the Ohio Department of Health. But we are modeling it after the adult education program. So we've brought some of those students in, and we're getting some lessons learned from that program of how we might work with high school students to get that credentialing. So that's another piece. And I want to make people aware, or families aware tonight, that if that's something they have a question about, definitely reach out because we are able to help you with that. And we're looking at planning for that right now. The other thing that I wanted to mention is that in the future, you know, we know that there may be loss. Summer school loss is certainly out there. We have no real research around loss over a situation such as this. And even the remote or virtual learning assignments do not consider health crisis because we hadn't experienced this before. However, what we're doing in plans for this, as students are being reconnected and as we're looking at the flexible or nimble settings that we might have next year, we are building into the curriculum maps ways to assure that we are addressing key work from the grade so that we're building in extra time. And one of the things that we're looking at is building 8-week courses or 8-week quarters so that we're using 40 days protected with instructional time, but then knowing that that only comes out to having a shorter period than what we're typically used to having, which is 45-day course quarters. We're going to take those other 5 days to build in time for reteaching, to build in time for assessment that wouldn't take away from this protected 40-day quarter. And so we're also looking at ways in our curriculum documents to support teachers with looking at, here's the prerequisite knowledge that students would have needed as they enter the course, and here are some ways to support them. And this is a cross-department activity. We are looking at ways with special education to support special education students, but then also students that are struggling. So here are some supplemental aids, some supplemental supports, or modifications or accommodations that we can use with students to kind of get them back up to speed onto where they need to be. So we're trying to build in some scaffolds on the front end. We are also going to continue to work with our staff on identifying students, being able to connect with students, and making those connections throughout the summer so that we're not waiting till we start up again in August, September, we don't want to fall behind. But those are some of the things that we're trying to do to build in some supports as we're moving forward.
Yeah. And then, Mr. Ragland, I also like to say to your point also, if families are, watching or listening, and please call, go online. We can get you in summer school. We can. If you need some additional help, As Dr. Ocasio stated, if something happened during that period of time that the families were disconnected from schools, students were, please call us and let us know. You know, we don't have any judgment. All we want to do is help our families and help our students. So please reach out to us and let you know what you need. That's why, again, we go back to Alicia's group. The families may have had a hardship and they need some assistance with their families, but we want to make sure that the students that are missing, that we could not locate, the families reach out to us so that we can make whatever accommodations and provide the supports that those families and students need. So I want to say that again, so that the families can reach out to us, reach out to the engagement office, go online, you can register you in summer school, whatever it is that our families need, please, please know. Summer school just started on Monday, but if we have to make accommodations, I mean, this is just Tuesday, just give us a call tomorrow and we will make whatever accommodations that we need to make to get our students and families' needs met.
And thank you for that, Dr. Dixon, and thank you as well, Dr. Ocasio, for that. And one of the things I wanted to see if it was possible for us to continue to think about how we can engage the broader community in helping us to reach some of our families. I've heard a lot from a lot of faith leaders who were saying, you know, we have a body of folks, we are willing to help in any capacity because we're hearing so much about how students have not been able to get on board. If there is something that we can do over to the summer to help, please let us know what that is. And I know that Ms. Gillison has her ear to the ground with those folks as well. And so if there's anything that I can do as a board member to help kind of push that narrative and engage, particularly some of our broader community members on how we can reach our students, even going door to door to find them, I'm willing to do that. And kudos to Mr. Wortman and your communications team, Dr. Dixon. I have seen a tremendous increase in communications over the last several months, and not just with us as board members, but to the broader community. And I know that that was intentional on your part. I know that Mr. Wortman has been working very hard in making that happen. And so just kudos to you all for everything that you are doing. I've seen a real intentional push from you to make sure that our community is knowledgeable about the things that are happening within the district. And I want to make sure that we recognize you for that effort. So thank you and your team for all the work that you are continuing to do. And I want to continue to be supportive in that manner. So thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. And then I think, Madam President, I would go to our presentation for the calendar, or did we have that at a So at this time, we have a couple of members of our team want to present a calendar change for this upcoming school year for your consideration. And I will have Dr. Angela Chapman, Dr. Michelle Klein, and Dr. Roush will all do the presentation with the rationale, the why, and the how, and what we have planned if we move forward with this calendar change. So I think I'm passing it off to Dr. Roush or Dr. Chapman.
Your mic's not working, Dr. Roush.
I keep trying with the different settings. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now. Thank you.
My apologies. It has been an evening fighting with technology. It seems, you know, it's as I get the screen set up here, it's hard to imagine or hard to believe that it was just 6 months ago that I stood before presenting the calendars for 2020 and 2021 school year and the 21-22 school years. And boy, what a difference what a different place we're in now after these 6 months. And that kind of leads us to why we're here today. The world really has changed in just a very short period of time. We've seen a major shift in how our workforce operates now. You know, things are going to look different next school year. We all are aware that it's going to happen, that's going to be the way things are going to be. We are planning for it. Other districts are planning for it. We know that's where we're going. within that context, not only for the world of work in general, but in education, especially in our school buildings, that work's going to shift. That's going to look different. And I know Dr. Dixon kind of gave a preview of where we'll be and some thinking that will be in 2 weeks. We'll have a little bit more information there. We need to really work on these calendars now. This is an important piece to try to get completed as we're going forward. So with all of that, as we have all of these changes coming up, it is critical and it's so very important that we provide the necessary professional development for our staff. And there's a number of really important training activities that we need to have in place for next year. Everything from health and safety of our students and our staff, a very major and forward, certainly in the age of COVID, to really providing additional skills and opportunities and development for our staff and our teachers to be able to learn how to use the various tools. We have brand new curriculum. The board has just recently approved the purchase of English language arts and mathematics curriculum for the entire district. So there's that unveiling and rolling out, which would be a yeoman's task in a good year, let alone with all of the other parts and pieces that are certainly moving around in today's day and age. And then certainly social emotional learning and training, and then training around equity. In addition, we really want to make sure that we're empowering our families and educating them along with our staff as far as how we're, what are their students going to be learning, what's school going to look like in the next year. I think that it's just as equally important that our families, we bring our families with us and they're equally on the same page as we're going forward on this journey together. I want to keep this presentation fairly short. I know we often talk about the minimum requirements for our school year. If we do a blended learning model, there's exemption from the minimum school year, from the minimum hours that are in another section of the revised code. The blending learning model provides an exemption from that. But even notwithstanding that, what we're going to present to you this evening actually only sees what I would call the equivalent of 5 school days of less instruction. I don't want to say lost instruction. I would say the equivalent of 5 days of less instruction in that format, because we got to get beyond how education. We got to get beyond just thinking about time in a seat in a building with 4 walls. This is the time to really kind of shift that paradigm and think about education in new and different ways. And I think that by this blended learning model, an online model, this really allows us to kind of think differently, think broader, think greater as far as how we're going forward. So what are we bringing for you? Modification to the traditional school year calendar. Teachers would still report on August the 24th. However, we want to provide a good solid piece of professional development for all of our staff. I'll have that on the next slide. But by providing that, we're going to have to move the first day of students back until Tuesday, September the 8th. That's the Tuesday after Labor Day. Last day for students and staff and all the breaks, they remain exactly where they were in the calendar you all approved back in March. As I said earlier, proposing 2 weeks, 10 days of professional development activities for our staff. And this is for all of our staff. These are for our teachers. These are for our IAs. These are for our safety and security staff. And I could go on and on. I don't want to leave anybody out, so I'll stop there. We really want to make sure that we're providing those opportunities for all of our staff. We're buying back a couple of days. That Tuesday, September 8th PD day we had, well, if we're going to shift that to our first day of school for students, we're gonna take that PD back. We're also gonna pull back the professional development day in March as well. Records days remain the same. That's the extent of the changes for traditional calendars. Now remember, we do have our Woodcrest Elementary School, our one-year-round school. Again, teachers will continue to report on the day we'd already set forth. That's July 27th. However, we would move the first day for students up by a day. We'd provide some initial kind of online we provide some initial professional development for those teachers, giving them 2 days there, but we want them to be a part of that same 10-day professional development. And so when we do that, we need to again buy back a couple of additional professional development days. You see, we pull 3 back there, so they actually will have the equivalent of 6 fewer days of instruction. But again, rethink that paradigm, rethink how we know and we know education. Records days remain the same. Intercessions remain the same. And in short, we wanted to present this evening. We wanted to have time for the community to hear the presentation, have them give you input and feedback. And our hope would be that you would adopt these changes for the June 30th, 2020 meeting. That is the extent of my presentation. And my team and I would be happy. We all would be happy to answer any questions you have.
Yes, there's a question. Vice President Reyes has a question.
Thank you. Dr. Rodgers, thank you for the presentation. A quick question. I noticed on your slide, you stated we will need to train families on how best to support their students in these new learning environments. How will that be communicated to our families, and what will they expect? What are we expecting for them, the training to look like?
That's a wonderful question. Thank you very much for that question. I think that we've started reaching out with our engagement team. I believe that Dr. Ocasio and Dr. Klein, Dr. Chapman have all been really working to put that together. Again, I think we're trying to make sure that they understand how Clever works. They want to understand how our online curriculum is going to be done. If anybody wants to step in as far as some of the more specifics on how we're going to provide that professional development to our parents as well, but we want to make sure that they have access to the same information that we're providing to our so that they understand as our students are going through these online learning modules and going through these various components and these various programs, that they have the same understanding so they can help their students, they can help guide their students, they can check and see where their students are.
I can interject some of that information. So what we looked at were the buckets of information that we needed to share. There's a whole bucket around work staffing conditions and the things that they'll need to do to respond to the CDC recommendations and how we would need to transition students, and the whole host of safety measures that teachers wouldn't typically have done prior to March 13th. So there's a whole bucket around here's what's happening because of the conditions that we must work under in order to meet the guidelines for safety and security. The other piece of that is we need to consider then this is a new learning environment for many of our students, and as well a new teaching environment. So we have that tech integration piece, and we had not gone far in terms of tech integration. We were beginning to move in that direction, but now we want our teachers also to be flexible and nimble because we may have changing settings next year. So it may be that they have students in cohort groups. So there may be times that students are present, times that they work remotely online. There may be times that because just like this pandemic closure, they're working remotely. And so one of the things that we'd like to do proactively is really help our teachers be equipped in order to do that, to make instruction engaging. And we are also shifting in the way that we're doing instruction, giving them opportunities for reteach. They're going to have to address gap skills, things that kids might have missed as a result of this unusual circumstance, as well as things that they may have had gap skills previously. And so the other piece of that is it's really equipping teachers with instructional strategies. And then there's the component that we have adopted these new program materials to give much more content-rich, rigorous instruction that's aligned to standards. So there's a whole bucket of work around exploring and preparing teachers to be able to use these resources well. And that combined with these other conditions, of course, then makes for more intense work needed. The other piece of that, another bucket of work, is that we want to support our kids in terms of the social and emotional. We know that just by this experience, the things that are happening in current events, the things that are happening with this health pandemic, there are things that we need to consider for students' emotional needs. It's been a difficult time for adults, but it's certainly been a difficult time for students as well. So we have this whole idea of looking at social and emotional as well as enhancing equity in our buildings. So with all of these four areas, we feel like that's a place where we could strengthen and work to better equip our teachers to provide effective instruction. We also had talked about working with our parents, because these settings are different for parents, and equipping them to be able to support learning at home, whether it's full-time remote as we've been experiencing in the spring, or if it's supporting learning on a part-time basis where kids are in school sometimes, at home other times. We want to be able to better equip parents as well. And then we have this other option where we are creating an online academy, and that's a whole different set of skills, not just from a teaching lens, but then also in equipping our parents. So we felt like these buckets were things that we could cover, and we didn't think we could do it justice in just 2 days, which is what we would have been afforded without the calendar change.
So Dr. Ocasio, I appreciate that. I'm really want to kind of concentrate a little bit on the parent piece, and maybe this is Alicia or somebody else. So thank you. You know, I reached out to you as a nonprofit organization with some parents that, especially Spanish-speaking parents, immigrant parents, parents who are new to a school system, and then now going online. You know, single parents having 3, 4, 5 children and having to navigate between now being the teacher, also being the mother, and also being, you know, having to work. So I'm interested in, and maybe it's not appropriate now, but I'm just interested in how we're rolling out. I think it kind of lends to a previous comment about how are we utilizing our community partners, right? Are we going out to those nonprofit organizations, to those religious organizations, and saying, you know, school starts X date. This is what school's going to look like, and we need to have parents either come in, need help, maybe train the trainer so they can help us train our parents. It's just such a large number of parents that are now having to learn something different. Yes, do we have families that definitely are very familiar with working through Zoom, working with these systems, but we also have some parents who are challenged, and some of our kids are outsmarting us. And you know, coming to the case that I sent you, you know, the children told mom, school's over, it's done. She heard of the news and she called it a day. So she had 3 children at home. They came into cahoots and told mom, and she has all the stressors of COVID and the stressors of losing her job and all of that, where she's like, it didn't sound right to me. And luckily she reached out, and thank you. You know, now we've got them, you know, we've got them enrolled in summer school. But I'm just concerned that we're going to have a lot of those parents that don't understand the system. And then some of our kids may say, yeah, we're delayed in 2 weeks, and actually school was canceled. I don't think they'll say that, but I'm really interested in what are those plans, and maybe not necessarily the plans, but more so, how are we communicating? When should parents start hearing what is being presented, when they can get the training, and how are we utilizing our partners to make sure that we're have all hands on deck? Sorry, very long.
Thank you, Board Member Reyes, and you bring up some very valid points. The Department of Engagement, we have been working very closely with teaching and learning. So part of our strategy is, you know, we have the family ambassadors in our buildings. So the team, the teaching and learning team, they're going to train our family ambassadors, and then our family ambassadors will work with the parents at their particular school. So we plan on doing a family engagement hour via Zoom or WebEx, and that'll be once a week, and that'll start mid-July, and that should run all the way up until the start of school. So if a parent misses it 1 week, they can definitely pick it up the next week. But this way it's intimate, and it is the family ambassador that all of the parents know at that particular school. So the training for that will begin really soon. Actually, I'm meeting with Tracy's team tomorrow so that we can get that started.
Thank you, Ms. Gillison. Do we have a promotion that's going to go out in multiple languages, in multiple mediums? So am I going to see this in 4, 6, and 10? You know, Telemundo, the Somali TV newspaper. Are we going to see all of that so that our parents, and also some of our parents who cannot read, how are we communicating all of that out there to ensure that they have access to that? Yeah, but then is this training also going to be offered in multiple languages?
The training is going to be offered in multiple languages, and we'll be very strategic. There'll be those parent meetings specifically for special education. There'll be those meetings for ELL. And we have mobilized all of our new American and immigrant partners, ETSS, for example, Chris, and I had a meeting today with Ohio Hispanic Coalition. And so everybody is on board to really help us out with this, because we have to bring parents along. You know, bringing parents along is going to make this ride a lot smoother. And it's going to be, that's 360 degrees of engagement. And that's what we're working on.
And now maybe the board can help also, because like the Guadalupe Center, you know, it has over 4,500 families they work with. So we might need to throw a little bit broader net to ensure that we're getting all the parents that are out there.
Yeah. So thank you. I would like Scott, if he can, to chime in. Just know that we will have a communication strategy for our parents, our students, our partners. Alicia is also working to have another partner convening. So once we relayed to our families, to the board first, about our plan for next year, we then want our partners, we're going to convene our partners and tell them where they need to fill the gaps, right? So we have the plan first, and then we will open it up to our partners to convene and tell them this is what we need on whatever day, whatever hours, but be very intentional with our partners so that they understand our strategy and they know where they fit. They know where the need is. So that will come. But also I want Scott to chime in on the communication strategy, because we know that Alicia, again, she has that partnership strategy, the parent strategy. Scott is the one that has a communication strategy. How do we send it out, the different languages, the medium? So Scott, this will be your opportunity to chime in, please.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. So yes, to add to what Ms. Gillison said with engagement strategy, communications is also working on what our strategic approach will be to all of reopening. So we know we're going to present here later this month, but then we really take the ball from there in communicating out to the community and to all of our stakeholders, and we'll be working hand in hand with the engagement team to make sure we reach everyone that we possibly can. We'll use all of our typical communication methods. You know, we have our auto dialer and email system. We have our website, social media channels. We'll be partnering with our ESL team for the translations and make sure we get those done on time. But it's just a really strategic approach that we're going to have to take over those 2 months leading up to the start of school. And I look forward to working with the team to get that done.
Yeah. And then it will also be an opportunity too. We can use our students. We can use our board members. You know, when you think about the heavy lift that this will be, I think it's critical that we move this calendar, because it would afford us to have 2 months to get information out, to work with our parents, to get our students ready. And so that's what excites us about this opportunity. And then do those crucial trainings that we need. And then the whole entire organization becomes a learning organization. So it's no longer that one group of, you know, one part of our family cannot say that another part was receiving training and they didn't. The entire organization, almost 10,000 of us, will be involved in that training on different modules. So that's powerful, to be able to say we're all learning together. We all can troubleshoot together, and we have a common understanding, because we understand that our roles are going to look very different this fall than what they've currently looked in the past. So, you know, this is a critical time for us. We're going to be looking for thought partners and people to provide the training for us. We know that we don't have the capacity to do it on our own. We're going to be reaching out for partners in the Columbus area and other places to provide the professional training that we need in these critical areas. So we need this time, and our union families are on board with us. We talked to our union presidents, and CEA was definitely on board with us. And thank you again to John Coniglio for your leadership. And this is needed. And to our other union leaders, they know that we needed training. We've been talking about training in the organization for some time. This will allow everyone to have WebEx, Zoom training, of whatever it is that we won't take for granted that people have in this organization, and we would do it together without hopefully any distractions.
I appreciate that. Just my last comment is just as you create the strategy, very similar to what Board Member Ragland said. When we sent out the survey, if you gave us something that's short and sweet that we can share, not only as board members but as many of us serve in other roles professionally, that we can easily put on our websites for our organizations that we serve in. That says if you have a child, because I know that our families are mobile and they do move and they change phone numbers and they change addresses, and the summers when it's happening, and with COVID, we've had a lot of impact on our families who have had to have multiple families move into one location. So communicating and making sure that they are also communicating with us, maybe a number that they can contact if you've moved, if you've done all that stuff. And I know you've probably done it, but just I know we have a platform, and making sure that parents, if they're hearing or community members are hearing this right now, they know that this is coming. They should reach out to the district to ensure that they get the dates and the information on when we're going to train and provide information for school for next year.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you.
But Board Member Beckley has a question, but I just wanted to kind of put a plug in, board members, that I've asked the superintendent to include us in especially portions of that equity training or diversity and inclusion training that the district will do. I think it's important that the full organization, that includes us, gets that training as well, so that we are all speaking the same language. So be on the lookout for that. So Board Member Beckerly.
I just have a huge way to go because taking the time and making sure that everyone has this training at a point in time when they can be laser focused, because they're not trying to it's not like a day here or a day there, or they're not trying to juggle their classes and other things, is really critical. It's a place in the past where we have fallen short in terms of enough development and continued development. And so being so intentional about this, especially given the radical shift we're doing in terms of how we're going to deliver instruction and educate our children, I'm just thrilled to see that intentionality. So thank you.
Thank you. I don't know if we had Dr. Chapman, do you want to chime in and say anything, or Dr. Klein about the calendar? Go ahead.
Yes, I just wanted to share that we know that when we return in the fall, that the teaching and learning will look dramatically different from the way it has in the past. And we certainly appreciate the gift of time to be able to provide professional development to all of our staff, over 9,000 employees within the district, to help them feel comfortable in their new role and their new way of operating. This is a huge learning curve for all of us, internally as well as externally. The way our students will engage with the content, the way our families and parents will engage with content, the way our leaders will engage with content. And so we appreciate your consideration. This is the need and is a heavy lift, and we will not be able to do this effectively and efficiently in the 2 days of PD that we have already allocated in our current calendar. So thank you for considering.
Thank you. And I'd just like to echo Angela's sentiments, but one thing I'd like to add is this is the most fiscally responsible professional development we could do. And so in this manner, it will give an advantage to all of our staff members and give us an extra edge to start the school year for our students and for our parents. So thank you for your consideration of this bold move.
Additional questions? Seeing none. Madam Superintendent, does that conclude your report?
Yes, that concludes my report. Thank you.
Thank you. So earlier in the agenda, I made a mistake and did not get to all of the speakers for public comment. And so I do apologize for that. It is important that we provide that space. And so I apologize to those speakers. And we now would like to go back to that item on the agenda to ensure that we complete the public comment agenda. So Ms. Nichols will join us again on the phone or on the, she will appear on screen, and she will be getting the next speaker, who is going to be Ms. Koyinsola Oye, to speak on CPD in Columbus City Schools, requesting the board remove CPD from schools immediately.
President Dare, the speaker's on the line. You have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Hello, board members. My name is Koyinsola Oye, and I'm a rising junior at Howard University in honors political science and history. And I am a Columbus Alternative High School alumna. 3 weeks ago, my friends and I attended a protest for George Floyd. While we were there, we got shot with wooden bullets, we were maced, and tear gas. The next day, while I was sitting at home healing, I decided to launch a campaign for Columbus City school students to remove Columbus Police Department out of Columbus City Schools. Not only was this campaign dedicated for students that were traumatized by the hands of the police, but it's also directly connected to the prison to school pipeline. Studies have shown that more students enter the criminal justice system when more police officers are in school, sparking concerns from some advocates of attempts to protect American children from mass shootings had unintentionally fueled a school-to-prison pipeline that disproportionately affects students of color. And it's not simply that more students enter the criminal justice system, but that this impacts the Black students at much higher rates. Black students were 16% of the total student enrollment in the 2011 through 2012 school year, but 27% of students referred to law enforcement and 31% of students involved in school-related arrests, according to the U.S. Department of Education. As leader of districts that is predominantly Black, what are you doing to change this? The school-to-prison pipeline starts in the classroom, which means that you can stop this. Many of you made this your campaign slogan. Many of you said that you would change something. So what are you doing right now? The ACLU reports that Black girls are 4 times as likely to be arrested in schools as white girls. In some states, they are 8 times as likely to be arrested. In a district that is majority Black students, what does this mean for them? What does this mean for our community? It means that as long as Columbus City Schools has officers in schools, they are choosing to funnel students towards prisons and criminalization instead of investing in their potential. Reform is not the answer. The police are brutalizing the students. Reform is not possible, and we cannot wait for promises of reform while our students are being traumatized. When we talk about student safety, what does that look like? It is time we rethink what schools would look like if we invested our money and time into the resources students need instead of armed officers. It is time we actually highlight the safety of students on all levels. And the district does not have to figure this all out by themselves. Campaigns like Dignity in Schools offer district recommendations and guides to removing officers and directing the funding to things that truly guarantee safety. Employing staff trained to ensure safe and positive school climates, such as community intervention, workers, peace building, transformative or restorative justice coordinators, provides better establishment for safety, as well as promoting youth and parent leadership with the schools through leadership and councils that have an integral role in creating, implementing, monitoring, and evaluating safe and supportive school climates. This may include serving as restorative justice facilitators in the schools, ensuring there are trainings for all parents, students, and community members to fully understand how positive alternatives are being implemented and who is responsible for different aspects of maintaining a positive school climate and monitoring any agreements with law enforcement. Other school districts have done it. Minneapolis has done it, and Portland, a school district almost the size of Columbus City Schools, has done it. So what is stopping us from taking this change? Black mothers fear for their students' safety. Black mothers are always on edge doing quick prayer for the safety of the children they once carried. Even in our schools, Black children are forced to be traumatized by the presence of the cops. No matter how many prayers Black mothers say, the children always seem to be in danger wherever they go. Columbus City Schools in some ways raised me, and I am thankful for the countless teachers, counselors, and college directors that helped me reach my goals. But police officers in my schools never encouraged me or made me feel safe. Instead, I was fearful of the power that continues to exude over students. The Columbus Police Department has responded to our outcry, and they said they would never harm children, that they would never hurt us. But in actuality, that is not true. Students have come to me and said that the police officers have pepper sprayed them in school and even threatened to tase them. Is this the type of environment you want our students to be attending? This is a war zone, and our students deserve peace of mind. As board members, I urge you to choose the right side of history. The community and the world is watching. The evidence.
Thank you. You are over time. We do very much appreciate your comments. Are there any questions or comments from board members? Dr. Pierce and then board member Ragland.
Thank you so much, President Adair. To our student leader and activist, I have had the great pleasure of watching you grow and develop as a leader throughout your time at COS. So I am beyond pleased that you are continuing to stand as a vanguard for young people in our community. So my question to you is this: do you have a list of students that you can nominate to serve on our Safety and Security Task Force? I would like to give those names after looking over them and reviewing them to be able to recommend some of those students so we have a youth voice on that committee.
Yes, so we actually do have a list of students willing to get on the task force, but before they get on the task force, because they are part of the CPD at a CCS team, they are waiting for the demands to be met first.
Okay, so when please send me that list, or let's talk offline about how we can get that list, how you can get that list to me.
Okay, thank you.
Board member Ragland.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Ms. Oye, for your comments today and for the discussion that I've had with you over the last week or so. My question is around the two cities you mentioned that are doing this effectively now. I heard Portland, but I did not get the other city. What was the other city that you mentioned that you said that they're doing this effectively now? Portland, Oregon, and another?
The other city I mentioned is Minneapolis.
Minneapolis. Okay. Thank you for that. Do you have anything that you can share with us about how long they've been implementing this strategy of no police in schools and what they did to get to that point? Were there discussions around what needed to happen, what they needed to see from students? Were there modifications that they needed to make to their policies? Do you have any information that you can articulate about how they got to the point and how long each of those cities have been implementing this program without school resource officers within their schools?
Yes, actually, we have sent a few resources over to you about Minneapolis and Portland about what they are doing and how they got to that, how they got into that, idea. And Denver is also doing it. So I know a lot of cities are participating in this. So if you would like more information on Denver as well, we can send that your way.
Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you so much. Board member Beckerly.
I just want to say thank you for your advocacy and your perspective, and please let's make sure we keep communicating.
Thank you so much.
Board member Brown.
Thank you. Just very briefly, I am looking forward to our meeting tomorrow afternoon. Appreciate what you had to say this evening, and looking forward to more communication. Thanks.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for, is there someone else? No? Okay. Thank you so much for addressing the board this evening. We will now move on to the next speaker, who is Yvette Clayton, to speak to us about the Columbus Police Department in CCS. Board action requested, remove the Columbus Police Department from CCS immediately. We will wait for Ms. Nichols to come on with Ms. Clayton.
President Adair, the speaker's on the line. You have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Yvette, and I use she, her pronouns, and I am the youth leader for the youth group Voices of the Unheard. And we are working on a campaign called Count.Cubs. And this campaign, well, the goal of this campaign is to work on de-escalation, transformative justice, and increasing counselors, because unfortunately we're starting to see that a lot of these schools, policing has just completely taken over. Like, school isn't becoming a place where students are learning anymore. It's just becoming a place where students are being policed, or where students are being, they're just not allowed to be students. So we're working right now to collaborate with CPD out of CCS to build the campaign even more. So part of our campaign is removing the police out of schools and replacing the police officers with other better, I can't think of the word, alternatives such as like social workers and nurses and principals that are actually for the students versus just trying to get them behind bars or suspended or, well, that's just the beginning of the campaign, but yes, we're working right now to collaborate with CPD or CCS. So, yeah, I was asked to speak today, but I don't really have much to say besides that. People are interested, they can email me, but I don't even know what this phone call for. I didn't know if there was anything else to say. I was asked to speak, so I don't really have a script.
Okay, that's fine. I think that you feel like you're finished. So why don't we just go ahead and open it to the board members for any questions? Board Member Ragland.
Thank you, Madam President. And ma'am, thank you for getting on the call and speaking tonight. My question is around your perception of our adults. You mentioned our teachers and our principals, and you said that you felt like they were there to try and move students to prison. And
yes.
Is that really your perception of the adults that are working within our schools?
Yes, I wouldn't say all the students. I wouldn't say all the teachers. I wouldn't say all the principals, but I would say there's enough to where it's called the school to prison pipeline for a reason. There's been instances of children who are getting punished for things that they should not be, getting suspended for things they should not be, and even with that, like with the school to prison pipeline, there's looking at the behavior, but there's not really an examination of why the behavior happened or what causes the behavior. So there are times where like a student might be acting out because they're being, I don't know, like hurt at home or they're just going through something, but then they get sent to the principal's office and they're suspended, expelled, and they're suspended or expelled from school versus just like having other alternatives. And yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. I see no other comments. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts with us this evening. We will go ahead and move on to the last caller for the evening. We will hear from Julia Alwyn who will be speaking to us about Columbus Police Department in CCS requesting that we remove CPD immediately. And we will wait for Ms. Nichols to join us with the caller.
President Adair, the speaker's on the line. You have 4 minutes. Go ahead and begin.
Hello, my name is Julia Allwine, and I'm an alumni of Columbus Alternative High School, and I was a CCS student from K through 12. In 1975, only 1% of schools in all of America had some type of law enforcement, and more importantly, it wasn't until the early 1990s that Columbus City Schools added officers to their building. CCS has existed for over 150 years, and for a majority in our building. In fact, for much of the time, we had almost double the student body we have now. At its peak, the district had 110,000 students, and yet we did not feel the need for a single police officer in our schools. Students today are not much different than students in the past in terms of tension, fighting, and the day-to-day struggles they face. If we found healthy alternatives to solving student issues and de-escalating disagreements for most of our history without police officers, we can and should do it again. So why has the number of police officers changed so drastically from the 1% it was in 1975? For most schools across the nation, it was because of fear of school shooters. However, there has not been a single instance in all of our nation's history where an officer has protected our students during a school shooting. Let that sink in. Not once since we began adding officers under the guise of protecting from school shootings have they protected a single student from this danger or made any significant interference in a school shooting at all. In fact, the greatest threat to the students of CCS is not the unnamed school shooter, but the man with a gun who the district hires to surveil and traumatize students from the CPD. Think about that. In fear of someone coming into our schools with a gun and hurting our children, we have hired 19 officers with guns to come in and hurt our children. The evidence is overwhelming. Countless studies have been done, including those at ACLU and Washington Law Review most recently, that concur decisively having officers in schools is incredibly harmful, provides almost no benefits, and disproportionately affects Black students and students of color negatively. Safety without officers is possible. Safety with officers does not exist, not for our Black students. In 2017, in Columbus, Iota, a student walked into the school and discharged a gun twice, and the situation was still diffused with no one getting injured, including the student. A counselor with a relationship to the student de-escalated the situation, and in fact, officers later expressed displeasure at the way the counselor peacefully handled the situation. The job of the school board is to protect the health and safety of our students. It is not to do what is most politically viable. It is not to make decisions for their safety at some point in the far future. It is not to shy away from what's right because you fear political retaliation. So if you are invested in our students, show us now. Investment looks like spending $1.3 million on counselors who have continually been proven to be essential for student success, and it does not look like directing that money towards the 4 students have consistently voiced they want out and who have a history of being violent, racist, and murdering people in this city. Investment looks like hearing student voices, such as those incredible speakers who spoke up today, and listening and taking the cops out of school so another middle schooler is never again body slammed at South High School for walking into a cafeteria. It does not look like delaying this decision further, empty promises of renegotiation, when lack of action has already seriously hurt students. When these students share their stories, it is not an abstract district or a story to shrug away. You cannot claim ignorance because we have equipped each and every one of you with numerous research. You cannot claim it is not your responsibility because you are our leaders. And so when students share that cops have hurt them, it is on you. You are financing the officers who traumatize these students. You are choosing a brutal racist police force over our children. You can make structural change and the community is watching. We voted you in, and we will most certainly vote out those who choose criminalization and trauma over love and care for our students.
Thank you. Board Member Pierce has a few questions.
Yeah, so once again, I'd like to thank you for your continued advocacy, standing in the vanguard for your peers. I again watched your protest as a student over at COS, so I continue to applaud your agency to stand for your peers. My first question is this. You talk about the changing demographics of our district. How, yes, at one point we did have over 110,000 students. In that research, did you notice the changing demographics in our staff within our buildings?
What do you mean by that?
So specifically in Getting Around Brown and other research, we showed that as you had teachers that moved from outside of our district that no longer live in our district, there became a relationship gap. As our teachers moved out of our neighborhoods, they weren't familiar with our students and families. So in your research, were you able to uncover that an element of what we're seeing in our school relates to cultural competency, relates to teachers not knowing students and families?
Yeah, I'm actually glad you brought that up because it is something we talk about when we talk about the school resource officers in schools. Because one reason people often cite to keep them in schools is the relationship gap they filled. But like you just noted, before this, we had relationships with the students and they weren't formed by the SROs. And so even though now some SROs do serve that purpose, we don't need armed officers to serve that purpose.
So am I correct in understanding that your organization is interested in individuals that will build a meaningful relationship with our students being in the buildings?
Yes, but those individuals can absolutely not be from the Columbus Police Department.
Oh yeah, so I'm talking about the whole universe, teachers, counselors, everything. This isn't just for SROs. My next question is then related to the question that I asked your colleague. Given the role that you are playing in this movement, do you have a list of young people, a list of students that are ready and willing to sit at the table to help craft how we move forward?
Yeah, and I just want to echo Queen Sola's sentiments in that we do have young people who are very ready to move forward. But first, we need to see that the cops are out of CCS. The task force can certainly come after that, and we're excited that that be the first step to reaffirm our commitment to Black lives, but not the last step. But that step needs to be taken.
Okay, thank you so much. Let's talk offline about how we can get that list.
Board Member Ragland.
Thank you, Madam President, and thank you, Ms. Allwine, for your advocacy and meeting with the board tonight. A couple of questions being that what you've expressed as being listed as demands. Are there any type of modifications to behaviors within our buildings that you all will agree to that would allow us to look more favorably on your proposals? So, being that there would be some give and take, we remove the police officers out of the buildings, but students must demonstrate these types of standards within the schools in order to remain. Are you willing to have those types of discussions with the board? And do you have suggestions around the types of behaviors that you would not tolerate should we look supportingly on your proposals?
Yeah, so the cops are continually proven to be racist murderers, and so we don't think it's good practice to use the threat of putting someone who will brutalize students as a bargaining chip to guarantee good behavior. So no, that's certainly not something we would agree to because that is traumatizing and frankly a little bit disturbing. So no, we would not agree to that. In regards to addressing student behavior though, I do think that's a good question. And I do want to, give a reminder that all the individuals who have spoken today, they don't need to have the exact 10-point plan for exactly what taking cops will look at for their calls for cops out of school to be valid. And so I appreciate that you're asking people for suggested solutions, but also you are a board member and it's y'all's job to do that research and lead us. And so we, of course, are happy to contribute the solutions we've researched and that we've already emailed to you. But we also don't need to have every single detail sketched out for our call for cops out of schools to be valid, especially because if we're talking about student misbehavior often comes from trauma and other deeper root causes, and cops contribute to that trauma while counselors address that. So if we're really talking about addressing student behavior, which I think is a question you've brought up quite a lot, the best solution is removing cops immediately because they have zero training in how to address youth behavior, and they in fact often escalate the situation to make it worse, and then putting in counselors who are very trained in that and have in fact dedicated their whole life to that.
Thank you. And a couple of points that you made that I think are exceptional. For me, one, a part of being a board member, I think, is to engage the community with questions so that they, as I am representing the community, they can offer us suggestions around where we should go. And so I do think that there is an element of the community that currently is not necessarily speaking out that believes that any type of removal of CPD out of Columbus City schools should be in conjunction with some agreement that allows for better behaviors from the students within our schools, and that should be a part of this discussion. And that's why I'm asking you, ones that are making the demands, if this is something that you all have considered. As you're approaching the board, it's one thing to ask for certain things, but then there's one thing to say, well, hey, here are some compromises, and I think there are some elements that we would agree on. But we've seen evidence of a lot of activities that are going on within our schools that I know full well our counselors aren't necessarily equipped or trained to stop once they have started. And so I think as a part of the broader discussion, one of the things that you may want to consider is talking to some of your colleagues and some of the other students who may be coming on board with the task force that Dr. Pierce has asked you guys to recommend about some of the things that they are willing to speak with us about improved behaviors from our students in conjunction with addressing the needs around CPD. And so as you identify students and recommend them to us, that would be one thing that I think that would benefit this entire discussion. Thank you again for your advocacy, and thank you, Madam President, for my time.
Thank you. And thank you, Ms. Alwyn. We do appreciate you speaking with us. And I think that you hit on some things that were very important in what you said. I just want to remind everyone, because we did make this announcement at the beginning. At this point, the contract with CPD will expire on the 30th. We are not going to enter into negotiations on that contract. We will convene a working group of community members, students, people interested in helping to address a holistic approach to what does safety and security look like in our district. And we want to have meaningful dialogue to ensure that any system that is in our buildings not only protects our students and staff and community, but is also done in an equitable and fair way that addresses issues of systemic racism. These are all very real, and this board is committed to looking at that. And so this is, the process that we've chosen. And we will announce on the 30th, the members of this working group. We will announce the timetables, and we will do this in an expeditious manner. So these are very important topics. And again, it aligns with our work already around equity, as well as what does our school look like in the future, as both an academic setting, a safety setting, a community setting, all of those things. These are very ripe right now to discuss, and it is important that we have everyone at the table and we have input from everyone. So I also just wanted to say I am so proud of the students and our graduates who spoke tonight so eloquently, passionately, and that just makes me proud, just honestly, as something that we're producing, right? So thank you to those students who and alumni who did speak tonight, and the community members and parents and everyone else on this topic. Please continue to share your thoughts with us. It is important, and we will move forward. Okay, so thank you so much. Now that officially closes that agenda item, I do again apologize for that. We will now move to item 6, which is the internal auditor's office. Mr. O'Connor, do you have a report today?
President Adair, the Office of Internal Audit does not have a report this evening, but I did want to remind everybody of the next Audit and Accountability Committee meeting that will occur on Thursday, June 25th at 3:30, and that will be a virtual meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. We will now turn it over to the Treasurer's Office. Mr. Treasurer, do you have a report this evening?
As a matter of fact, I do. Thank you, President Adair. This evening, I have for you the monthly financial report for the month of May. And this report was reviewed by the Finance and Appropriations Committee last Wednesday. Through the month of May, year-to-date revenues are down about $7 million, below plan about 1%, and expenditures are running below plan now through May at about $26 million under plan, or about 3%. That's drove up the ending cash balance about $18 million above plan to where it stands at $328 million at the end of May. Highlights on the revenue side, on state funding, we were about $2.1 million under plan. This reflects the start of the reduction in state aid. I believe I mentioned to you before, as a result of the COVID-19 crisis and the state reduced funding to school districts throughout the state, our share was about $9.2 million. That's going to be taken from 3 of our funding payments, 1 in May, and the other 2 payments will be in June, that will be reduced, each payment about $3 million. We should end the year, though, about $21 million under in state funding, in addition to the $9 million. Remember that there was a little over $11 million in school wellness and success funds that originally we had planned for them to come through the general fund, and they in fact are going through a separate fund. So that's just a matter of how those funds are being accounted for. Property tax allocation this month came in. Last month we expected it, but it didn't come until this month. So the unfavorable variance last month is now reconciled itself, and we will end the year at about $2.5 million above plan for that line item. Other revenues for the month of May came in under plan fairly significantly, but that has to do with a $2 to $2.5 million Medicaid reimbursement that we expect to receive in June. Here you can see the variances. State aid clearly stands out in terms of dollar amount, and all other revenues, as we've discussed in the past, is the next largest dollar variance for the year at about $10 million above plan. Those are the interest income and pilot payments in that category that we, again, have talked about in previous months. On the expenditure side, personnel is now running about $2.9 million under plan year to date. And that represents about 0.5% on $557 million expended so far this year. When we break that down to salaries and wages and benefits, you'll see that salaries and wages are spot on. We're 0.07% off of plan, or about $257,000. On salaries and wages. Benefits are the leader in under plan at 3.1 million under plan, right around 2%. The month of June, we are going to recode 11.8 million in personnel expenses from the general fund over the student wellness and success funds. Again, in coordination with what I just previously mentioned about state revenues being recorded in a separate fund rather than in the general fund. So we will match that accounting transfer here in salaries and wages. Purchase services and charter deductions are running under plan again for the month. We're about 15.7 million year to date under plan. And as you can see, it's broken down there, almost $11 million in purchase services and 5 million in the deduction for charter schools. Charter schools did experience a reduction from the state along with other public schools. And as I mentioned to you, 9.2 million was reduced from our funding. And for the schools that are deducted from us, it was about 1.7 million that expense will be reduced. So the net reduction to us in terms of cash balance, it was about $7.5 million hit to our cash balance due to those reductions. Transfers out, you'll see in the report, ran about 2 million under plan. That's a timing issue. We expect those transfers to occur in the month of June. On the variance side, you'll see here purchase services. The orange bar jumps out in terms of dollar amount at almost 11 million under plan. Most of the other items that stick out are large variances, but very smaller dollar amounts and smaller contributors to our overall expense picture. Something that I added this month was a discussion with the committee about some of the expenditure variances that I believe are due to the closure. And I was letting the data kind of speak for itself in this regard. I'll only go over one page of this. I did multiple slides for the committee, but I want to just demonstrate to you what you'll see in the report that I have attached to board docs that you can take a look at later. But what I did here was to look at expenditures period by period. The periods down the left-hand side come out of our accounting system as period 1 through 11. That's we start with period 1 as being July. So, and period 11 is the month of May. What I wanted to do is compare where we were month by month last year to where we are month by month this year, and see if that changed, if there's any differences that occurred once we got to the closure, that is, once we got to the month of March. So I drew a line here on the chart for the committee to, as a line of demarcation, kind of pre-closure and post-closure, to see, was there a change in the data that we could associate with that closure? And so this is a pretty good example. You can see in the grand total line that year over year, our personnel expenses, salaries and wages in particular, up about 3.3%. But when I break it down, pre-closure and post-closure, the two lines below there, the period 1 through 8 versus the period 9 through 11, you can see that there's a significant difference. We were growing pretty much at about a 4.1% year over year rate, but since the closure, it dropped to 1.4%. And I went through other line items, benefits, supplies, purchase services with the committee. I won't do that here, but just to see, this is the kind of change in the data that I was looking for. And then we dug a little bit deeper. In this particular case, what is down in terms of salaries and wages is substitute costs and overtime. And so, when you think about the closure, you would expect that to be down because we continued to pay our staff their regular wages throughout the closure. All in all, I summarized for the committee that we're seeing my estimate is that we'll see about a $3 million savings in personnel costs, about $1 million in benefits, and about $2 million in supplies, for about $6 million overall savings and expenditures through the end of the fiscal year. We did not see any movement really related to the closure in the area of purchase services or in some other expenditure line items. And there's some logic behind that, those that don't have any, there is no impact on the closure on some of those expenditures. So more slides than what I put on the document on board docs. If you'd like to look at that, and I'd be glad to talk about that with you at another time if you'd like. So in conclusion, revenues below plan just slightly at 1% under. Expenditures are running under plan for the year. We are building a cash balance above plan, which pretty much is good news for us. And we will build a cash balance despite the reduction in state revenues this year. So that's my report for May, and I'd be glad to answer any questions if there are any.
Any questions for the treasurer?
Madam President, if I may.
Yes, Mr.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Mr. Treasurer, for your presentation. Can you talk just a little bit about some of the implications possibly next year that we may be looking at in terms of scenario?
Well, as part of the Superintendent's Reopening Task Force, Mr. Gooding and I are chairing the Budget and Finance Committee, and that committee thus far has focused primarily on some revenue scenarios and what we believe could possibly be the case for next year. So we've looked at additional funding sources like the CARES Act money. We've looked at, there's a HEROES Act that hasn't passed yet, but there's some money there that might be forthcoming. So we've assessed those possibilities. CARES Act money that we should receive should be around 27 million. You'll see a $30 million number out there sometimes discussed, but that includes money that will go to non-publics. So we will, as a district, net about 27 million, we anticipate. More importantly, we've been trying to look in that crystal ball and figure out what we might be able to expect in terms of state revenues. And knowing full well we're coming up to the second year of the current biennial budget, and then in the spring we'll start discussions about the next biennial budget. But for FY21, that's really a hot topic amongst my colleagues about what should we expect. We've run some scenarios of as draconian as a 20% reduction and a 10% reduction, and then most recently with some discussions again with my colleagues, a feeling that perhaps a plausible scenario would be to stay at this reduced level, our current funding minus the 9.2 million. That might be a plausible position to be in for next year. We won't know because for a while, because the state is watching their revenue picture. As we said the other day, a couple of months, April and or March and April, and don't really make a trend for them. And so they're really going to want to see April, May, June numbers, how they finish the year out before they can see what that trend in their revenue picture is really like. We'd love to hear sooner rather than later about what that state number might be for FY21. But I believe the legislature is going to take a break here for a while, and there may not be much talk about that. And I don't know whether they'll come back before the November election to have that kind of a discussion. So we may be, into November or halfway through our next fiscal year before we really understand what those reductions might be. But certainly that if we do continue at our reduced level, that's much, much better than an additional 10 or 20% reduction in state revenues. We know that we could face some slowdown in property tax collections. Those bills have gone out, is my understanding, and they will be due in August rather than June, and there was a delay there. But more importantly than the delay will be what's the economic impact on taxpayers' ability to pay their property taxes. Will there be a slowdown? Will there be an increase in the current unpaids or delinquents? We don't know what that's like. We haven't really modeled that yet, but we should know that picture pretty much by September. Again, several months into the fiscal year. So we've modeled it. And really the driver now that we're waiting for is the expense side. And that's all the work that this task force is doing and putting together what school is going to look like next year, and we'll cost those out. And that will be the next piece that we factor into our modeling to see how it looks for next year and the years to come. So I guess it's more just pointing out all the uncertainties that we face, and the modeling that we're doing is just to give us, I think Board Member Cole, you referred to them as guardrails, guardrails that we can look at in the future and know that somewhere in between the worst case and the best case is probably where we're going to have to operate. So that's a little bit too what we talked about at the FAC meeting.
Thank you so much for that, Mr. Treasurer. Again, board colleagues and superintendent, as we're looking at finalizing what school will look like when we do reconvene, I definitely want to impress upon you all, and I know you guys are doing the thoughtful work anyway, but I always want to do it from the board table and express to you all the grave importance of assigning a number value right? A nominal value to a quantitative value to what it is that you are looking at as you guys are deciding on what to recommend us to support moving forward to open school or consolidate or do whatever it is that you will be recommending to us. We think that's super important. And a big part of that is because of these scenarios that have been developed, we want to be sure that whatever's been designed in terms of priorities academically, that they align as much as possible to what is capable for us to maintain with these scenarios. I hope I said that appropriately, and thank you again for that, Mr. Treasurer.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the treasurer? Okay, thank you so much. We will now move into board matters. The first item on the agenda is in this section is 8.1, the first reading and emergency adoption of omnibus amendment to board policy. And we're going to have board member Brown speak to us about this.
Yes, now that I found the mute button again, or the unmute, thank you. We do have several policies in front of us tonight that will allow for the work to go on in the face of COVID, for making some changes that will allow staff to work from home pursuant to procedures adopted by the superintendent. Make sure we have a good assignment and transfer policy for administrators, and allow for blended learning. There's a set of 4 policies that are in front of us. 3 of them are nearly identical pertaining to the assignment and transfer. That's policies 1000, 3130, and 4130. And the other is the blended learning piece that I just mentioned, and that is policy 2370. Now, these are brought in this basis because they are needed for preparing for the opening of school. They are needed now for the planning and for that work to get completed and be underway. There's nothing necessarily controversial in any of this. They did not go to PRC, and that's in part because the Policy Review Committee was very heavily engaged in working on the equity policy and trying to get that completed, and it made sense simply to bring this directly to the board. I have reviewed it and discussed it with Dr. Roush, and I am recommending these for adoption. Are there any questions?
I have one.
Yes.
Hold on a second. Hold on before discussion. We need to do the
Okay, let's have, yeah.
So
We have
yeah, you're moving to just want to make sure I know your motion.
Yeah.
You're
I'm moving to adopt these 4 policies.
I think technically you're moving to waive the second reading and bring it for emergency consideration.
Well, I was going to do that after we had these on the table, but that's fine. If you'd like to do it in one step, unless no, 2 steps.
Yeah.
That's right.
Why don't we waive the policy for the second reading first?
Yeah.
Okay.
That way, when you move for 8.1, it will be both the first reading and emergency adoption of the omnibus amendment, if that would be okay.
It's fine with me.
I second the motion to move these for reading and adoption and waiving.
So the motion is to waive the second reading. That's the first motion, and then we will do a second on the actual adoption. Okay.
Yeah.
First motion.
So the first motion I'm making, and that is to waive the second reading and move forward on these policies tonight.
and that's what I seconded.
Okay.
Right.
Just making sure we're all clear, you know what we're voting on. Any discussion? Board Member Beckerly.
I realize that we're doing this because we consider them an emergency. I am just wondering exactly the timing of this emergency and how quickly we need these in order to be able to continue carrying out distance learning and all of the and people working remotely. So my reason I'm saying that is because this is a theme that I am going to be striking later in this meeting too. The PDK audit clearly identified as priority one that we need, that our policies are problematic on multiple levels. It occurs to me that before we continue to issue policies, if it might make some sense to run these by AJ Crable, our facilitator and our consultant who's kind of assigned to us from the Council of Great City Schools, to try to maybe get some feedback about structure, format, whatever it is that would be considered state of the art, such that we can start doing a better job with our policies in real time rather than waiting for some other time when all of a sudden we're addressing the PDK audit. However, if it's an emergency, it's an emergency. So I'm just raising that as something to discuss.
I can give a brief response from my perspective, but I do not have the information, and I'm sure somebody on the line can, about the exact timetable for when these are needed. I would respond in part by saying that I think that the suggestion of working with H.A. Craybill makes a lot of sense, for example, with respect to the equity policy that we're going to be getting to. But these are, I don't think, substantively the kinds of things that we really need to do that with. But if somebody there has insight on the timetable of when it would be good to have these policies modified and on the books.
Madam President, I think it would even be appropriate for Dr. Roush to explain the omnibus factor of this legislation. I think that might help shed the light on the timeliness factor. Not to mention just the fact that we have to do close of business at least before this month. But I think that omnibus piece he could explain, that might help.
Dr. Roush.
Yes, thank you very much. I'll start with the blended learning policy first. The blended learning policy is essentially a recitation of the Ohio Administrative Code. You need to have this policy in place if we're going to pursue blended learning next year. If we do not have the policy in place, you cannot do blended learning. So we need to get this policy in place in order to be able to do that. In regards to the work from home policies, right now we've been under a governor's order to do so. We had conversations with council. We identified there really isn't anything within your policy that necessarily grants that authority. This would explicitly grant that authority. It also directs the superintendent to develop procedures for how that works, so that if we go into the fall and we don't have a mandate that folks stay at home, that is a valid work assignment for our staff. And the governor's order that does that expires June 30th, by the way.
Okay.
Part of the problem is that we do not meet in July. So if there's a timing issue just about our meeting schedule. So, Board Member Beckerly.
That's exactly why I'm asking. If there's an opportunity here to start to get our policy act in a row, I'd rather see us do it now rather than later. If we need this done, and it sounded to me like the work from home was a little bit more critical than the blended learning, but if they all need to be bundled together, then that's fine too. I just wanted to raise that as a possibility.
Yeah, the blended learning is also necessary in order to pursue that as an option.
You mean we need to have a policy in place before we can
Correct.
pursue it?
You need to have the policy in place if we're going to do that for the next school year.
Well, that part I understand. We're talking about waiving a second reading. That's the only thing on the table right now. The policy itself is not on the table.
Correct. I was simply, yes, but that is the reason why they're on for an emergency and why the waiving of the second reading is to get those in place and ready to go.
And so the question would be if we had a second reading and in the meantime tried to run them by AJ, we'd run out of time.
You have one meeting on June 30th, so it's
okay.
You're really bumping against the deadline at that point. You're giving yourself hours.
That's fine. Thank you.
I just have a question of clarification.
Remember, Dr. Pierce.
So I would like to, Board Member Beckerly, I know you said this will come up at another point in tonight's meeting. The charge, I think, and please, other board members, colleagues, please step in and clarify to ensure that I'm understanding this correctly. The charge that's been given to us from the outside consultants related to our specific board retreat, as well as to the curriculum audit, is that we work in unison to develop effective, efficient, coherent governance that helps to guide student outcomes within our district. So I think if we look at it in the perspective of, as policies come up, shipping them out to this consultant or this person to look at, we're still missing the mark. So again, colleagues, somebody, could you clarify to ensure that I understand correctly that the main element, the main objective given to us from those consultants and those reports to, in a totality, really develop coherent governance for our district and the school, not just as each model comes along, using it as a magnus opus.
Yes, you're right. And I think that what Board Member Beckerly, I think, and she can certainly speak for herself, I think what she was trying to get to was strengthening the overall form and structure of policy to ensure exactly what you just said. And so I think that this just becomes a, how do we want to go about doing that? And perhaps that discussion is fine to have with our consultant. I don't know if it is fine to have him look at every single policy. That gets in the way of us getting things done. But I do think it's fair to talk about structure and governance and all of that with him. So I don't know if that provides any clarity, at least from my perspective.
It provides clarity. Thank you.
Board Member Beckerly?
I think it's both. I mean, I think that you're right, Dr. Pierce, that there's an overall problem with governance, I guess, to get to some of the discussions that we've had as well about what we mean by policy government. But I also think that part of that is in the detail. And please understand, the last thing I am suggesting is that every single policy gets run by AJ or run by anyone, it doesn't matter. But that we get guidance now as we're about to start implementing them to sort of start course correcting even before we take on that bigger piece that we also have ahead of us in terms of addressing. Because I think that the audit's conclusions regarding policies were kind of multi-level and multifaceted. I think some of it was about inconsistency between form and drafting and usage, and some of it was about clarity within the document itself, and some of it was about the overall structure. I think it's all of it, I guess. But yeah, no, please, I'm not suggesting that we run them all by anybody.
That's okay. I think that we got a little bit off to on what we were. Now we're kind of over here. So let's come back to what the motion was on the floor about waiving the second reading. Any additional discussion about that? Okay, so seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
President Adair.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carried.
Okay, now we need Board Member Brown.
Yes, thank you. Now that we waived second reading, I'd like to come back and move for the adoption of these 4 policies.
Is there a
I
second?
second adoption.
Discussion? Seeing none, will you please call the roll?
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
President Adair,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
That motion carried.
Thank you. We will now move on to 8.2, the first reading of Board Policy 2000, Equity. Board Member Brown.
Yes, thank you. Let me start off. This is a policy that certainly has been a long time coming. It's a policy that is of huge interest to this board and appropriately to the community and to Columbus City Schools. It's a policy that we can't further delay. We need to get at it, but we also, importantly, need to get it done right. Policy Review Committee has done some really good work on this. The last several meetings in particular, partly because of the really great work and load carrying that Tina Pierce has done. Partly Michael Cole participated in much of that, and a couple other members, Kelsey, and it's not coming to mind, but it's yes, Emily White. I'm sorry. Yes, and she participated from France. But I think it has shaped up real well in a lot of ways, but for a number of reasons, it's being offered tonight as a first reading. There has been conversation about, do we want to move forward and try to get this entirely done tonight? I don't think that's a good course. We've got a really good working draft. However, one matter that we want to address is that we have a chief equity officer who's going to be living with this policy as a major part of her job and her department's job coming up real soon. We have this person already on board, we have her hired, selected, and going to be starting on August 1. And it's my belief, and I think we can accomplish this by providing her an opportunity to take a look at this quickly and get back to us, even before she starts her job, if she's willing to do that. Because this will play such a significant role in her work, I suspect that she'd be willing to do that. Secondly, we do have some board members that have some thoughts about this policy. Obviously, as we took it through the Policy Review Committee, the thoughts that emerged were only those of board members who were on the committee. And it's clear to me that there's some additional thoughts. And because this is such an important policy and because it's our policy, not that of the committee, I think that it really makes sense to permit board members to provide some input. And frankly, there's an additional reason from my perspective, and that is because of some medical issues that arose over the last several weeks. I was significantly distracted and not able to pay the kind of attention to this that I wish I had. But that's no longer a problem. I'm good, and I can now, focus on this to a much greater degree than before. So with that, I am offering this for first reading so that we actually get it on the table before the board, and invite board members to provide input, to do some writing. That is very useful, and to invite participation by our new Chief Equity Officer, by AJ Craybill, and open to any questions.
Are there any questions or comments? Just as a reminder, first readings don't require us to do any voting. It just brings it to the board. Any comments or questions? Go ahead, Dr. Pierce.
I'll just say that as Board Member Brown indicated, we have been working on this as a committee for a number of years now. So I join him in his enthusiasm that we were able to get this out of committee and present it to the board. In doing that, it is my sincere hope that we all move with a sense of urgency to bring it back to the table. It would be disheartening, a disservice to our community, to our new superintendent, our new colleague coming in, for us to drag our feet with a policy of such importance, especially at this particular time. So colleagues, I urge you to please take a sincere, heartfelt look at this. As Board Member Brown indicated, write and share your feedback and your comments so we can deliver a really substantive, meaningful policy to our community at a time when families are questioning, do we care for our students? When staff are questioning, do we care for them? When our superintendent is championing and leading a staff to stand in the gap for us in many instances to say the great things that our district is doing, it because we may in some instances be too busy to champion some of those things. So our superintendent is the champion at all times for us. So again, I implore you, ma'am and sir, to please come back strong, ready to adopt this at our next meeting after having given your input.
Yes, I echo that. Please, everyone, take a hard look at it, and please provide any written comments or amendments to Dr. Roush by June 23rd. That is the 23rd. That is just next week. So please take a look at it, put some thought in. We want it to be right, like Dr. Pierce said. This is extremely important. This is, this is our time to really make a statement and have a very strong policy. So thank you to the committee. Thank you to the board members who sat on that committee. I know it was a lot of work, and so you are appreciated, and we will continue that work and create the best equity policy that we can. Okay.
Tina's work was awesome, by the way. So
Board
thanks.
Member Ragland has a comment.
Yes, I want to be clear that the second reading for this policy will be on June 30th.
Right now it is on that agenda, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. We will now move to item 8.3, the Ohio School Board Association Exemplary Employee Award. Board Member Beckerly.
All right, yes, I have an exemplary employee I would like to recommend. I'm looking for my cheat sheet here to get the language right. Okay, I would like to nominate, although I'm not officially doing it, but Alicia Gillison. She has created an organization that did not exist a little over a year ago. It is, she said it tonight when she called it 360 degrees of engagement. I was thinking of it as a multi-level chess game. It's got internal objectives. It's got external objectives and challenges and interfaces. It's multi-level. It's both student engaged and community engaged. And the amount of sophistication you need to have to manage all of these different fronts is truly exceptional. And in a little over a year, she and her team have accomplished an incredible amount in terms of getting the partners convened and getting them all, or working toward getting them all focused on the same goals and objectives, and on so many fronts. And then she gets tested by fire with COVID. And she's doing food distribution and parent engagement and student engagement and, you name it. And it has been phenomenal. And it has been the linchpin that has allowed us to pivot and be so successful during this period of time. And I have to say, personally, I am particularly gratified with Ms. Gillison's efforts and dedication, because I know that she gets why this is so important. Because at the end of the day, the way to improve our schools is to improve our community. And all of these efforts in some way are designed to and focused on engaging our families in meaningful ways. And it's something that needed to be happened. And for years, we didn't embrace this as our responsibility, in large part because the district by itself couldn't do it. So through Dr. Dixon's vision, and both in terms of having this Office of Engagement and choosing Alicia to be our leader, we have made incredible progress. And so I actually moved to nominate Alicia Gillison for the Ohio School Boards Association Exemplary Employee Award.
Second.
Everyone second. Is there any?
That was way too quick. I missed the second.
It's everybody.
I think it was maybe James or Michael that said it first. So.
Yep, that was me.
Is there any discussion? Board Member Brown?
Just very briefly, I think it's a great idea that we nominate Alicia. And I want to make sure that we all recognize that it's not Alicia alone, but she's got a great team with her. And also recognize that this position was created by our new superintendent. And she had the foresight and wisdom to create this position and this department even before COVID, with not knowing that it was going to serve such an incredibly useful purpose once we got into the pandemic. So thank you to Dr. Dixon as well.
Mr. Smito from the City of Columbus would like to say something.
President Adair, Board Member Beckerly, thank you so much. I don't have an opportunity to talk much, but I had to ask on this occasion. I think the resolution, the award for Ms. Gillison is wonderfully earned. I have been participating in these graduation planning sessions with Alicia, and I mean, not only is she so connected to the students, but the passion that she does this with, just, I mean, it's overwhelming and it's incredible. So, thank thank you for this for her. Really, this is very well deserving for her. She has done an incredible job. And how, I mean, to be on these calls with her and to see how she wants what is so, something so wonderful for these students, you could just tell that it's, I mean, she's acting like all of these children are hers. So it is very well deserving, and thank you for this for her.
Thank you so much, Board Member Ragland. Did you have something to say?
Yes, echoing the comments of Director Smito as well as Board Member Brown. I think the genius in Dr. Dixon creating this position was in the hiring of Mrs. Gillison and the bridge between her background, being the academic officer, chief academic officer, and then bridging that gap by combining all of the knowledge that she accumulated there with her knowledge of this community. This position has just been embraced across the city. Her entire department has just worked tirelessly to get this up and running. I want to make sure that I mention Scott Varner and Dr. Keisha Hunlin Jenkins for all of the work, and the rest of their team for everything that they are doing. I'm just so proud to have been a part of this type of transformation with Columbus City Schools, and kudos to all of you for the work that you are continuing to do. I am just so proud to lend my voice of support for this nomination as well. And good luck to you with the OSBA.
Okay, so we'll let you talk in a minute, Ms. Gilson, but first let's make it official and call the roll.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Dr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Vice President Reyes.
Yes. EAS.
President Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. Ms. Gillison, would you like to say anything?
Yes. First, I'd like to thank you all for this. Now, this is amazing. Like, wow. But I think Board Member Brown said it, and Board Member Ragland. This is definitely a team effort. And when I say team, I'm talking about the engagement department. I'm talking about our amazing community partners. I'm talking about our business partners. It's everybody that puts students at the core of everything that we're doing. Dr. Dixon, thank you so much for the opportunity for this position. And I feel like I'm walking in my purpose right now. So thank you all, and we will continue striving for our students, striving for our district, and just creating that ecosystem, school, family, and community. And we will continue to work together. My colleagues, my Chief Academic Officer Tracy, Chief of Transformation Leadership, all of our chiefs working together to make this work. It is a collective effort, and I just want to say thank you for the nomination. And I should probably shut up now because I'm so full. Just thank you, thank you, thank you.
Well, you are welcome. It is well deserved. And we hope the OSBA agrees too, and you can walk home with the award when they give it out. So thank you again for all your work and your team's work. It is so important. It's absolutely vital in meeting our mission, and you are so appreciated. Thank you. We will now move on to item 8.4, which is the Ohio School Board Association's Friend of Public Education Award. And I'll turn it to Dr. Pierce.
Yes, so it brings me great pleasure, especially after nominating our Chief of Engagement, to be able to nominate and recommend our Ethiopian Terehido Social Services, so ETSS. We within our district have roughly 17% of our student population are immigrants and new Americans. So imagine coming into a community where you don't know the language. where you're communicating and trying to speak with people and they don't understand what you're saying and they don't know your culture. And you yet don't know the new culture of this new place that you're in. ETSS steps in and provides tremendous services to our families to help them navigate a very serious situation. We ask those families to give us their babies, their most precious gifts, so we can educate them in our schools. And again, our great partners, ETSS is able to provide those translation services, to provide the social services, to help the families and students really understand the services that we at our Columbus schools provide, and our goals to ensure that those students are highly educated and equipped for whatever dreams they have in the future.
I second.
Thank you. Is there any discussion?
I would just like to say that Celeste is somebody that I've known. In fact, both Marilyn and I have known and worked with over many years. And he and his organization do a wonderful job. They really do a good job with everybody. And, and he even attends some of our school board meetings, always with a smile, always grinning. I love being able to put him out there as well for this award. I think that he'll appreciate it, and he's just really a good person.
Board Member Cole?
Thank you so much, Madam President. I just want to say also to Dr. Celeste Asphalt and his outstanding team there, thank you. And in fact, in his language, Amharic will be Amasaganalehu. So I thank you so much for the work you've done. I've known you well over a decade now, and not only have worked beside you in many different ways, but also watch you grow in your endeavors and grow that organization. Very proud and excited to support.
Thank you. Any other comments? All right. Could we please call the roll?
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Cole?
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you. And thank you, ETSS, for all the support you give to our students. And we wish you, all the luck in winning that award from the OSBA this year. We will now move on to item 0.5, resolution to accept the recommendation from the 2020 Columbus City Schools Millage Committee. I'm going to turn it over to Stan for a short presentation and then to Michael. I'm sorry, Board Member Cole, getting a little informal here. My apologies.
Okay. Thank you, President Adair. I've been asked to do a brief recap of what the Millage Committee has done and what led to this recommended resolution before you this evening. So to recap what your Millage Committee did, just to remind you, back in June of 18, the board adopted this resolution charging the committee with reviewing our strategic plan and academic needs, operational requirements, and the financial condition of the district with the goal that they would evaluate and recommend the appropriateness of a levy and or bond issue, and report that back to the board and make a recommendation on those items. When we began, we were supposed to begin this, let's see, I think President Adair announced the members of the committee in the February timeframe. We were supposed to begin in March, and then the pandemic came along and we got delayed. But when we finally started our meetings in late April, I began to frame the discussion around what I call budget buckets, and they focused on operations, life cycle replacement, and the facilities master plan and the pieces and parts therein. And so these were our three topics, and we did them in this order. We talked about the facility master plan and the life cycle replacement, and Dr. Dixon's team did a presentation on 21st century learning in the Columbus City schools. And the information shared about the facility master plan, the committee learned about the time frame that this takes, that this is the long-term approach to capital funding, and that from start to finish, it takes about 5 years. You begin with the planning phase and go through getting the funding and designing the building. And at the end, some 5 years out, you have a brand new building or a totally renovated building. So they got that picture for what long-term large capital needs look like, and we call that the facility master plan. And you can see here some of the issues that you discuss in the facility master plan being the co-funding from OFCC and feeder patterns and utilization and capacity of our schools, and what do we do with all of our legacy buildings. So the committee did get a fairly well versed in that process. We went on to talk about life cycle replacement and you know what that is. It's the annual and ongoing upgrading of buses and equipment and just general building maintenance, HVAC systems and plumbing and electrical systems. Operation Fix-It was used as the primary example of what life cycle replacement is all about. Operation Fix-It being the 2016 bond issue that was passed and provided $125 million for those projects. Those projects are substantially completed at this point. There's still some run out, but that was just the beginning to touch the tip of the iceberg, because the committee heard about an estimated $500 million in estimated existing need right now that's kind of in a backlog. And they also heard about the need for $45 million annually to keep up with these kinds of replacement needs, so that we don't develop the backlog in the future once we work it off. And lastly, in the next to last meeting, they heard a presentation from Dr. Dixon's team about 21st century learning in the Columbus City School District, and how one-to-one technology should become the culture of our school district at the start of the 22-23 school year, and what's involved with creating enhanced learning spaces and the professional development that's necessary to transform our teaching and learning. And we put a cost on that of about, as far as the technology piece, of about $2 million annually, and then a $15 million every 5-year refresh. And so we use that to cost out what that would be in terms of a permanent improvement levy. And we learned that this really, in doing a PI levy, we're talking about the technology needs in this 21st century learning, not because we haven't voted this in yet. It's really for the future. It's for the at best the 22 school year to begin that, and as indicated here, to get us to that one-to-one by 22-23. So the FMP, very longer term, very large capital improvement, and the PI levy being more year to year, addressing those life cycle needs, as well as this technology piece for 21st century learning in the school district. In the end, the committee passed a resolution, which is here before you tonight, that asks you to consider a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils to fund those needs that we've identified, and also to begin that officially begin once again the facility master plan process to refresh and redo, if you will, certain parts of that master plan, so that we can then look forward to the finishing that overall capital improvement throughout the district in terms of building renovations and or constructions. So that was real quick of how what the committee heard about from administration, and what led up to that recommendation that is before you this evening for your consideration.
Thank you so much. I'm going to turn it over to now Board Member Cole, who has the resolution and will discuss it. Before he does, I know he'll do this too, but just thank the members of the Millage Committee. They had very great discussion. They asked really tough questions. They were engaged. You could tell they really care about our district, and they served well. And so I want to just thank them personally. Board Member Cole will thank them on behalf of the board and the resolution. But just know that your work is very much appreciated. So turn it over to Board Member Cole now.
Thank you, Madam President. I also wanted to certainly express my gratitude in their show of support and leadership, particularly in the person of Mr. Phil Callaway, who is the chair, and also Mr. Jordan Miller, who served as a chair. Both men led with confidence, led with clarity, led to ensure that everybody understood everything and we were all on the same page. They did an outstanding job. Provided that, is it necessary that I go through the entire resolution, or are we okay with the first whereas, the last whereas, and the two therefore be it resolves? Awesome. Okay. I motion to pass a resolution to accept the recommendation from the 2020 Columbus City Schools Millage Committee. Whereas,
Board Member Cole, could you please read the entire resolution into the? Thank you, sir.
No problem, no problem. Whereas on June 18, 2019, upon the recommendation of the board's Finance and Appropriation Committee of the Columbus Board of Education adopted Resolution 19-15-390, creating a temporary millage committee. And whereas on February 4th, 2020, Board President Jennifer Adair announced the committee's co-chairs and members of the millage committee. And whereas the millage committee included a broad group of community and district stakeholders who shared their unique perspectives with the board and committee and were the voice of the community in this process. And whereas the community was charged with reviewing the strategic plan, academic needs, operational requirements, and financial condition of the district, and making a recommendation to the Board of Education on the appropriateness of levy and/or bond question, including form and amount, to be placed on the November 2020 general election ballot. And, oh Lord have mercy, your eyes go bad and then you start messing with stuff and then it goes out on you. Whereas, Lord have mercy, forgive me, I'm doing this on my iPad. We started off so smooth. Ms. Vice President Reyes, this is one of the moments where I need your glasses.
You want me to do it?
No, I'm fine.
Okay.
I'm good. I just
I'm
messed.
gonna write them down.
I just got out of the screen messing around, trying to make it bigger. Whereas the committee was charged with, or I got that part. Whereas the millage committee met a total of 3 times on April 27th, May 11th, and May 18th, and was presented information on the facility's master plan history and process, the district's life cycle replacement needs, and 21st century learning and CCS, including vision for one-to-one technology. And whereas on May 18, 2020, the millage committee adopted a resolution recommending the Board of Education consider a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils to fund the district's life cycle replacement needs and technology plan, and that the board formally begin the process to update and renew the district's facility master plan. And further, that the Board of Education consider and make a decision on these recommendations no later than its regular board meeting scheduled for June 16th, 2020. Therefore, be it resolved, the Columbus Board of Education accepts the recommendation of the 2020 Millage Committee and thanks the body for its thorough work. And be it further resolved that the Board of Education hereby directs the superintendent to restart the facility's master plan process and organize a committee comprised of a broad group of community and district stakeholders to review all district facilities and develop a plan that will accommodate and support current and future educational programs and district operations. Madam President.
That is a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Is there discussion? Board Member Ragland, are you raising your hand? Yes? Okay.
So the resolution lists the date of November 2020 as the original recommended date for ballot language, but the Millage Committee did not include that date with its charge back to the board. My question is, why did the November 2020 language need to be included in this specific resolution? And what is the process by which we will go through to determine whether or not November 2020 is the right timing for an initiative on the ballot? That's my first question. I'll get an answer for that, and then I've got several others. Thank you.
Okay, so to answer your question, that whereas was the original charge of the board, and that was the original charge, was to ask the committee what they thought about the November 2020 election. So that language is, I believe, verbatim from the charge. So that's why it's there. And then, as you noted, the where it's the resolved or their actual recommendations, that was the committee declined to provide a recommendation on the time for to go on to the ballot. So the committee determined that there was a need. They determined that what was presented to them in the 4.7 mils and the life cycle and technology, those were a need, as well as starting the FMP was all something we should do. They declined to actually recommend it to go on for this November. You ask about the next step, or what is a step. That's kind of, what we've been talking about. Technically, the board has to then put a resolution of need, and that would go to, and Stan, you jump in here, you know this better than I do, that goes to the auditor.
County auditor, right.
County auditor.
Yeah.
And so at this point, that would start then the process of them looking at it to then do a second resolution to go on the ballot. You will note that that is not part of this resolution. So we are not proposing that right now. It is solely to adopt the work of the committee. So we as a board would need to determine if we want to put on a second resolution to seek that certificate of need, or whatever it's called, and then follow the steps for seeking to go onto the ballot. So that is not part of this right now.
Thank you, Madam President. My next question is around specifically the millage committee declining to list a date. Could we include language around that in this resolution? Since it was a charge of the committee to begin with, and they declined to present a date, I think it's important enough that the depth and breadth of what the committee decided be included with specificity in the resolution. And so I'd like to insert language in this resolution that says specifically that the millage committee declined to give us a date and a charge for November of 2020. Is that something that can be amended?
Yes, it sounds like you are making an amendment. So that is taken as an amendment, seeking an amendment. So we would ask for a second.
Second.
Okay. Is there discussion on that amendment? Mr. Treasurer.
I just, can we wordsmith this somehow so I get it correctly? The language in here, as you noted, President Adair, is a verbatim recanting of the charge as well as the resolution that came from the committee. So I would like to know just some wordsmithing, Board Member Ragland, what you might like me to write in here to recognize what you're pointing out. Is it one of the resolved or whereas, just help me a little bit with writing.
I have an idea.
Board Member Beckerly?
Yeah, I think that, because I thought about this earlier when we got this, I think Board Member Ragland, if we were to insert a phrase in the paragraph that says, whereas on May 18th, and it goes through all the things the millage committee did. It adopted a resolution recommending the permanent levy, a permanent improvement levy in the amount of 4.7 mils to fund, and that the board formally begin the process to update. Oh, after technology plan, but decline to make, and then parrot the language above, but declined to recommend
November 29th.
yeah, that the levy be placed on the ballot on the November 2020 general election ballot. So you just have to insert there, but decline to recommend.
I would accept that, Board Member Beckerly.
Okay.
I'm writing feverishly. Bear with me.
You're fine. Dr. Pierce. Dr. Pierce.
I don't think it was a decline in attending those meetings. It seemed like the committee had good discussion and decided that they did not want to put a date on it. So as opposed to using declined, if we could come up with another word that says, you know, by consensus through dialogue, they decided not to put a date on it.
Board Member Brown, did you have a comment?
Yeah, what if it says that they considered, they carefully considered and chose not to make a recommendation with respect to the timing of going on the ballot. I think that captures what everybody's saying.
I would like it stated with specificity that they declined to go on in November 2020, since that was the specific charge. And they specifically said no to that. I think that should be included in this resolution, that they said no.
They did not say
Back,
no.
they did not say no.
No.
Did not say no to that.
They said that they were not going to address that charge because they felt it was better that the board did it.
Did that itself, exactly. That was the spirit in which they made that recommendation. It was not a declining. If it was a decline, it was a decline to weigh in on going on a November ballot. It was not a decline to say that we don't want that to happen.
Maybe the language could be, as our general counsel was suggesting, they chose to defer to the board on timing, because that is what they did. They didn't say yes or no.
Sounds good.
Yeah, defer is a better term. Defer.
So is the language to be inserted in that same paragraph where we were speaking right after to fund the district's life cycle replacement and technology plan, and then insert I'm trying to read in the notes what Dr.
Chose to defer to the board on when it would be placed or the timing.
Should it say, would I put in the word but chose to defer? I mean, is the word but an okay word in there? I don't know.
I don't think you need but. I think
You can use
and because there's an and after, so it's just a list of the things they did, right?
Okay, and chose to defer the decision on timing
to the board.
On timing of a PI levy to the board.
I think it should be chose to defer the decision on when to, because the language previously was when to place it on the ballot, or whatever that language was right above it. Just pattern. When to place, when it should
On
be.
the timing of a levy issue.
I would accept timing of a levy issue as a part of my amendment, in addition to what you've already expressed, Mr. Behort.
So this is what I've written so far, and chose to defer the decision on the timing of a levy issue
to the Board of Education.
So Dr. Roush has made a suggestion, just, I mean,
He did.
carefully considered, but chose to defer to the board as to when to place a levy on the ballot.
That's well stated.
I like it.
Simple English.
Agreed.
We good?
We're good.
Okay, let me bear with me for a second. I'm going to erase a whole bunch of stuff I've noted here.
And then you can cut and paste from his comment, Mr. Treasurer.
I will, yes, I will do that. I will capture that here in a moment. So the resolution or the amendment before you then is to, at that point in the resolution, after the word plan, to insert and carefully considered but chose to defer to the board as to when to place a levy on the ballot. Insert that section. That's the motion for an amendment.
I second that motion.
Okay, is there any discussion? We just kind of did that. Please call the roll for the amendment.
Okay, Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Vice President Reyes.
Yes.
President Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
And Dr. Pierce.
Yes.
Okay, that motion carried.
Okay, thank you. So now we have the resolution as amended. Is there, wait, we already did the motion to approve.
It's been moved and seconded, and it's now before the board as amended by the insertion of that phrase.
So now we just need to do the roll call on that motion.
As long as there's no other discussion, yes, ma'am.
Is there any other discussion? Thank you. Seeing none, call the roll.
Vice President, yes, ma'am. Vice President Reyes.
Yes.
President Adair.
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly.
Yes.
Mr. Brown.
Yes.
Mr. Cole.
Yes.
Dr. Pierce.
Yes.
Mr. Ragland.
Yes.
Thank you. That motion carried.
Thank you. We will now move to item 8.6, resolution on racism as a crisis in education and public health. I'm going to turn this over to Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much, Board President Adair. Please bear with me as I read through the resolution in its entirety to ensure that everyone is aware of the full language. Resolution on racism as a crisis in education and public health. Whereas the American Medical Association states that racism contributes to health inequities in the United States, and the American Public Health Association launched a national campaign against racism. And whereas the terms race and racism are not interchangeable constructs, each needs its own distinct conceptualization, measurement, and analysis for public health research. Race is a social construction with no biological basis, whereas racism refers to a social system that reinforces racial group inequity. And whereas racism is a social system with multiple dimensions, individual racism is internalized or interpersonal systematic racism is institutional or structural, and is a system of structuring opportunity and assigning value based on the social interpretation of how one looks. This unfairly disadvantages specific individuals and communities while unfairly giving individuals and communities, and saps the strength of the whole society through the waste of human resources. And whereas the mission of the Columbus City Schools is to ensure that each student is highly educated, prepared for leadership and service, and empowered for success as a citizen in a global community. And whereas Columbus City Schools recognizes the important connection between education and health, as education can produce a variety of benefits that improve the health trajectory of an individual, and poor health can adversely affect a student's education. And whereas education and segregation and whereas racism and segregation in Ohio and Franklin County have produced an educational divide, as examined in the 2013 Franklin County Children's Report, Why Neighborhoods Matter to Education, which shows that race, school segregation, and shifting educational policies have deeply impacted Columbus neighborhoods and opportunities for children. And whereas research literature and case law document racial inequalities produce unequal opportunities for educational success. Systematically, these policies, practices, stereotypes, and biases work against children of color to affect their opportunity for achieving educational success. And whereas racial disparities in student discipline rates have been documented for decades, providing evidence that students of color are more likely to be disciplined more harshly than their white counterparts for similar or less serious offenses. In Ohio's 8 largest urban school districts, Black students are 4 times more likely to be suspended than white students, while economically disadvantaged students are over twice as likely to be suspended as students who are not economically disadvantaged. And whereas inequitable systems of school finance at the federal, state, and local levels fail to produce schools with adequate or sufficient funding to achieve the desired educational outcomes. The inequities generate large funding differences between wealthy and impoverished communities, which are further intensified by special grants, caps, and guarantees that contribute to the enduring gaps in educational outcomes for children of color. These inequities further result in unequal access to key educational resources such as highly skilled teachers and high quality curriculum. And whereas the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools are engaged directly in racial justice work, as reflected in our recent PDK curriculum audit to address racial and educational inequalities and implement recommendations for system-wide improvements. And whereas the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools partner and build alliances with organizations that have a legacy and track record for confronting racism and equity. And whereas the impact of racism on education and public health deserves action from all levels of government. Now, therefore, be it resolved that we, the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools, hereby declare racism a crisis adversely affecting our education system and public health in the city of Columbus, Franklin County, and state of Ohio. And be it further resolved that we, the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools, are committed to reviewing our policies and practices through a racial and educational equity lens. And be it further resolved that the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools are committed to conducting all human resources, vendor selection, and grant management activities through a racial and educational equity lens, which includes a review of all internal policies and practices, such as hiring, promotions, and leadership selection. And be it further resolved that we, the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools, will work to progress in equity and justice-oriented district with the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools, identifying specific activities to embrace diversity, advance inclusion, incorporate anti-racism principles throughout Columbus City Schools, including in leadership, staffing, and contracting. And be it further resolved that we, the Columbus Board of Education and Columbus City Schools, will continue to establish alliances and work to secure adequate resources to implement portions or all of this resolution. The physical impact of this resolution is that the Columbus Board of Education will consider in the Columbus City Schools budget allocating adequate financial resources to accomplish these activities.
Second.
I will second
Thank you.
the motion.
Board Member Ragland seconded. Is there discussion? Board Member Ragland.
Yes, thank you, Madam President. I'd like to start by thanking Dr. Pierce and all of those who worked with her on the development of this resolution. I was able to provide my feedback, and I really thank her for addressing a lot of my fundamental needs in the resolution in its drafting phase. She knows that and we've spoken very, very succinctly about contracting and with our vendors and what we are doing as far as the finances of this district are concerned and the inequities around the finances of where our finances are going from the district. And I thank you, Dr. Pierce, for addressing that very comprehensively in this resolution, and I look forward to our work together. Thank you, Madam President.
Thank you. Any other comments? Board Member Brown?
Yes, I just want to also commend not only Dr. Tina Pierce, who put a lot of time and effort into trying to shape this up, and it wasn't an easy task, and to all the board members that provided some input. This was not an easy one to get completed to everybody's satisfaction, but I think that's where we came out, and I like this resolution. Think it's important for us to adopt.
Other discussion? Okay, seeing none, please call the roll, Mr. Treasurer.
President Adair,
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Sorry, yes.
Dr. Pierce,
Yes.
Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes.
Yes.
Motion carried.
Thank you.
If I could,
Okay.
Madam President,
Go ahead.
unrelated, at least not directly related to what we've just done on this, there was one correction that I made in the process of wordsmithing and technically correcting this that surprised me, and it occurs in the fourth whereas clause, but it's a statement of our mission. And as I looked at that, it finally, despite our adopting the mission some years ago, that the words highly educated are not and should not be hyphenated. That's why it's correct in this document, but why we may want to take a look at the mission statement going forward and make a correction there. Just wanted to give everybody a heads up about that. I'm not going to, yeah.
Thank you. Okay, we will move into the consent agenda, which is item 9. The consent agenda covers items 10.1 to 23.7. Any board member can request an item be removed from the agenda by a majority vote. Is there a motion to approve? I'm sorry. Do we need to remove anything? Anyone have any requests to remove this evening? Okay, seeing none. Is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
Second. Or motion, please, motion.
I'll second.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Treasurer, will you call the roll?
Ms. Beckerly,
Yes.
Mr. Brown,
Yes.
Mr. Cole,
Yes.
Dr. Pierce,
So because I don't want to mess up, in this point, would I have to note anything that I'm abstaining from?
yes, ma'am.
Okay, so with the exception of 16.1, yes. I want to abstain from 16.1.
Got it. So noted. Mr. Ragland,
Yes.
Vice President Reyes,
Yes.
President Adair,
Yes,
motion carried.
thank you. We now are in to board announcements. Does anyone have an announcement this evening? Dr. Pierce.
Thank you so much. So I have a couple of announcements. I would just like to, with the first announcement, go back to agenda items 3.1 and 4.1. We talked in very abstract terms about ideas and suggestions regarding student behavior today, and also in receiving our comments. So I would just like to ask our community, as we think about how we want our schools to look, how we want safety and security to be implemented, to think about our PBISs, our positive behavior interventions and support. What rewards promote positive behavior? Is it a skating party? Is it a free haircut or hairstyle? Or is it an iPod? Think about restorative practices. How do we teach children to resolve conflict? Is it through punishment or is it through mediation where students can talk through their conflict with one another and even teachers? Yes, children and adults can talk through their conflicts with an objective facilitator. So my second announcement is we had a very historic Supreme Court decision given yesterday, and it comes from a foundation that was built by the Civil Rights Act of 1964, an act which we got in this country through protest and young people standing in the vanguard. And it's so fitting that all of this is happening this week as we take public comment from our students, our families, our alumni about, again, safety and security in our schools. And right the day after this Supreme Court decision, the power of protest is still making change in this country, moving us closer and closer to true equity, true inclusion, true diversity, where individuals can be who they are and love who they want to love in freedom. And so I just want to announce that I'm super excited that that decision also came during Pride Week. So all of our LGBTQ plus staff, students, families, we love you. Congratulations on this historic win.
Thank you. Any other board announcements? Board Brown.
Tina's already taken most of my thunder because I was going to also mention Bostock. I'd already done a little bit of writing on it. And yes, it is a great decision, even though it pertains only to the rights of LGBTQ in employment. The way it's written and written by Trump appointee Neil Gorsuch really is a strong endorsement of the concepts between the concept of treating all people with respect, with dignity, and providing equal justice under the law. It really, I think, paves the way for this approach to be taken in all areas, even beyond employment. And it's a powerful decision.
Thank you. And just to kind of piggyback on that, we have been putting out diversity pride videos, and every Friday. So I do want to thank the communication team and Tyler and Scott for getting those together and putting them out for the community. And look for more. Every Friday we put them out, and I think we got two more weeks, I think, of June left. So maybe you'll be seeing your friendly board member, another board member soon. That's a hint, guys. Send your video in. Any other announcements? Okay. So now we will move into item 25, which is executive session. Vice President Reyes, I believe you have a motion.
Let me pull it up here. I apologize. I was listening. Misty, is it in board docs? I got it. I knew I hadn't updated. Sorry. I apologize. I was looking at the wrong one. I move the Board of Education recess into executive session per section 121.22 G3 of the Ohio Revised Code to confer with an attorney for the public body concerning disputes involving the public body that are subject of pending or imminent court action, and per section 121.22 G1 of the Ohio Revised Code to consider the appointment, employment, or compensation of public employees.
Thank you. Is there a second?
Second.
Lots of seconds. I think Mr. Cole was the first to second. Please call the roll.
Mr. Brown?
Yes, provided we take a short break.
Mr. Cole?
Yes.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes?
Oh, sorry. Yes.
President Adair?
Yes.
Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
And that motion carried.
Thank you. So just a reminder to the public, we will come back from executive session and adjourn the meeting from this public session. We have several items, so it might take a while. So for board members, we will see you in the breakout room. And yes, we will take a break, Board Member Brown. So see you in the next room. Thank you. The board has now reconvened from executive session. The last thing on our agenda is to have a motion to adjourn. Is there a motion?
I motion that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
Second.
Second. Is there a second?
I heard
Second.
Mr. Cole. I thought I heard
Yes,
Mr.
second.
Cole.
All right. Please call the roll, Mr. Treasurer.
Now,
Yes, please.
Dr. Pierce?
Yes.
Mr. Ragland?
Yes.
Vice President Reyes? President Adair? Ms. Beckerly?
Yes.
Mr. Brown?
Yes.
Mr. Cole?
I'm going to do that one. Yes.
I'm glad these meetings are recorded, and that motion carried.
Well, good night, everyone. Thank you, community. We will see you all next week.
Good night,
Good,
everyone.
good job, everyone.
Yes, great meeting.
Good job. Good meeting.
Good night, everybody.
Yeah.
Good night.
Good night.
Thank you all.
Good night.